Chapter 231, An Unexpected Program. The main material for clay sculptures was clay. The two of them felt it was fantastic as a vivid sculpture slowly formed in front of them as the old man slowly kneaded the mud and colored it. It was 11 o'clock when the clay sculpture was finally finished. It had taken more than 3 hours. The sculpture is done. After he finished, the old man put it in a box, tied it shut, and handed it to Xian. "Thank you, Master Liu." Xian accepted it happily. "How much is it?" Zif asked while holding her bag. "That's up to you." The old man smiled and said. He was not short on money and making clay sculpture was just one of his hobbies. Zif was a little confused as she did not know the market price for clay sculptures. Seeing Zif's expression, the old man chuckled and said, "Just leave 200 yuan. 200 yuan? Zif paused. Although she was unaware of the normal price, she knew that such a delicate clay sculpture was valued at far more than 200 yuan. 200 yuan probably wasn't even enough for him to need one of brother-in-law's arms. "Fei, leave all our cash," Xian said all of a sudden. Hearing her words, Zif directly took out more than 2 stacks of notes from her bag and put them on the small table. "Master Liu, the clay sculpture you have made is of great significance to me. I regard it as a work of art which is impossible to measure. I just want to express my appreciation." "Thank you, Master Liu. Now I have to leave." Xian smiled, gently nodded her head and turned to leave with Zif. After hearing what she said, the old man shook his head slightly. "What a beautiful sculpture." Zif repeatedly sighed with emotion after she walked out of the store. "It's really kind of that taxi driver. Master Liu, however, at such an old age, seems really lonely since his children and wife aren't around him. Maybe." Xian looked back at the store and said softly, "This is something every old man has to go through." At this moment, Xian somewhat missed her parents. The last contact seemed to have been a month ago, and they had not met each other since a year ago. At that time, they also had some white hair. In the meantime, Xian felt somewhat helpless. As the child of a great family, she could buy whatever she wanted and live a carefree life, but there were skeletons in every family's closet. Xian was a little envious of the slow-paced rural life. "Elder sister Yan, shall we go for lunch first? I'm so hungry." As Zif was speaking, her stomach growled. "We can find a restaurant nearby for lunch." As soon as Xian answered, Zif's cell phone rang. She picked up the phone and put it down after saying a few words. Then she put her lips to Xian's ear and said in a low voice, "It's elder brother Jia. He has something to discuss with us and is inviting us to have lunch with him, just the 3 of us. Do you agree?" After thinking for a while, Xian nodded her head gently. With her permission, Zif picked up the phone to respond to him and hung up it after settling on the place to meet. "I don't know what he wants to discuss with us," Zif murmured as she reached out her arm to stop a taxi. After they got into the taxi, the driver drove them to the Yassi restaurant, which was 500 meters away from their hotel. "Welcome, a table for 2? Upon seeing the guest center, the front desk manager greeted them with a smile. "Jia Dong has booked a room," answered Zuf. "You're Mr. Jia's guests. This way please, Xuanhuan, guide them to room 888, the manager said to a waitress. The waitress led Xian and Zif to the room. Although it was only an ordinary room, the style of decoration was both fresh and unique. There was a small round table with 6 chairs surrounding it, with some flower pots and furnishings. Jia Dong was sitting on one of the chairs, playing with his telephone. Upon seeing the two of them, he nodded his head with a smile and said, "There you are, please come sit down." Then he said to the waitress, "You can bring the food in." "Okay." The waitress smiled and nodded. About 5 minutes later, all the dishes that Jia Dong had ordered were served. Although they were only 3 people at the table, Jia Dong ordered 8 specialty dishes and a bottle of Remy Martin. Jia Dong personally poured both Xian and Zuf some wine. After finishing the first sip, Xian said, "Why do you want to meet us, child Jia?" "Oh, here's the thing. When it came to business, Jia Dong became serious. He smiled and replied, "There's a program called My Voice which is being recorded the day after tomorrow. The guest star for the next episode was Xuanhuan, but she called the program division this morning and said that she had to go back because one of her relatives was seriously ill, so the program division needs to find a new guest star to take her place. After I heard the news, I remembered you and thought that this episode would be more interesting if you took part. Can you spare the time, Xian?" Whoosh! Zif's eyes lit up in an instant. My Voice was a very popular program, which combined music with a game. Using the superb performances of the 6 contestants on the show and the random opinions from the host, the guests needed to figure out who was the real singer and sing with them. It really was an interesting program. Zif knew that this program would be beneficial and help Xian become more popular. Furthermore, since Xian and Jiangyuan TV station were still attracting people's attention, the publicity would be more effective now. Elder sister Yan. Realizing that Xian was undecided, Zif became anxious and couldn't help reminding her. Zif was stunned by the sudden chance. Xian, however, gave considerable thought to this matter. She had already promised that she would go back tonight and had no idea whether Meng would be unhappy. Did Jia Dong offer her this opportunity with the best of intentions? Was there another purpose? Would this be related to Child Liu and Child Lin? At this moment, Xian is somewhat hesitant because the news came as a total surprise. However, she was aware of her condition, and this program would help her out a lot. After a pause, Xian eventually nodded and agreed. "Thank you, Child Jia. You're welcome." Jia Dong laughed loudly. With a gleam in his eyes, he tentatively said, "Elder brother Lin chatted with me after you left yesterday. He really appreciates you, so I paid attention to the current programs. I never expected that I would find this show." "Thanks, Child Lin. Thank you for your kindness," Xian responded. "It's no bother." Jia Dong shook his head and said, "I recommended you mainly because of your good temperament and attractiveness. I heard that several media outlets and some paparazzi are keeping an eye on you." Oh. Jia Dong did not talk about the work anymore. Instead, he chatted with Xian and Zuf about some interesting things in the entertainment circle. About 1:30, the lunch ended. Jia Dong drove the two of them back to the hotel in person. But unexpectedly, when they were just about to reach the door, several reporters rushed out. They dashed up and asked hastily, "Hello, Xian, what do you think about the incident involving the Jiangyuan TV station? I heard that you will appear in a large-scale movie. Is this news true?" "Excuse me, we're not holding a press conference now, please stand aside." Zif immediately protected Xian and hurried into the hotel with Xian. Once they saw them enter the hotel, those reporters stopped asking, then shook their heads and left with regret. As for Jia Dong, who was standing by the car, he slightly shook his head and sighed. These people were also arranged by him. Their only purpose was to help Xian recapture the feeling of being a popular star. With that, she would be more eager for success, which would pave the way for Child Lin's plan. However, what just happened was only the beginning. As long as Xian went out, a large number of reporters would appear. Beautiful flowers are quickly picked. I don't know whether Xian is lucky or not. Jia Dong sighed with emotion, then got in the can and left. After Xian and Zuf returned to the room, Zuf snorted and bantered. "Elder sister Yan, perhaps you should take some bodyguards with you when you go out. It's not as exaggerated as you said. I'm not that popular yet." Xian gave her a bland response, but her eyes were filled with joy. Being followed by paparazzi and reporters indirectly meant that she was somewhat popular, but it was annoying to have her privacy intruded on. Xian had not expected her trip to the mainland to go so smoothly. Although the incident at Jiangyuan TV station had not started out well, it became a special type of hype because of Han Yang's assistance. "I really didn't expect Child Jia to be so kind and invite elder sister Yan to My Voice," Zif said with curiosity. This is probably also related to Linji. While speaking, Xian became emotionless. After thinking for a while, she said, regardless of whether he's involved or not, let's believe that Child did it for benevolent purposes. We'll return to Hong Kong the day after we finish recording. Okay. Zif nodded her head. I'll call Zhang Han first. I don't know how upset Meng Meng will be since I can't go back today. Xian walked into the bedroom with her mobile phone and dialed Zhang Han's number. Zhang Han. I. Xian pursed her lips and said, I can't go back today. Is something wrong? Zhang Han asked. Yes, a program named My Voice invited me to be a guest since the original one can't make it. I should be able to go back the night after tomorrow or 3 days from now. Oh. Zhang Han's eyes narrowed and there was a dead silence. 10 seconds later, Xian was inexplicably a little stunned. She twisted her lips and said, why don't you say something? Zhang Han pondered for a moment, then said, who arranged this program for you? The son of the chief operator of the TV station, whose name is Jia Dong. After a pause, Xian answered truthfully. Do you know Linji? Zhang Han asked. Xian hesitated for a moment and then said, Jia Dong invited us to dinner last night, and we met Linji there. When I was talking to you, he was not far from me, and he even borrowed my mobile phone later. After thinking for a while, Xian still did not tell Zhang Han that they insulted him at the table because she thought that would put Zhang Han in a bad mood. But she did not know that Zhang Han always ignored unimportant people. Chapter 232, repeatedly postponed. However, after hearing what Xian said, Zhang Han also understood what was going on. He said, you should not go out to dinner alone with Linji. Huh? Xian suddenly let out a slight cry and slightly pursed her lips. She began to feel glad secretly and said, are you worried that someone else will take me away? All of a sudden, Xian froze. Why was her tone unconsciously filled with shyness? Whoosh. Her face instantly turned red and she felt her heart beat quick and gradually. Yes, I'm worried about you. After thinking for a while, Zhang Han replied honestly. After receiving his affirmative answer, Xian had a warm feeling inside. She snorted softly and said, I won't go out with him, for no reason than that I have a peculiar dislike for Linji. Okay, make sure to be careful over the, and call me if there's something wrong. Zhang Han responded, nothing will happen, and I'll probably be back on the night after tomorrow, after I finish the recording. Xian smiled and said, don't worry, I won't be bullied as long as Zif is here, but I fear Meng Meng will feel sad. I said I would go back today, but I failed to keep my word. I'll coax her. Zhang Han smiled faintly. You always know what to say when it comes to coaxing Meng Meng. Xian snorted and said, where are you? I hear the sound of wind from the phone. I'm on Mount New Moon. The two chatted for about 20 minutes. Xian did not talk to Meng Meng for now. Instead, she asked Zhang Han to coax the little sprout this afternoon. She would call him back later tonight. On receiving the order, Zhang Han walked towards Meng Meng, who was in the pet area. After hanging up the phone and fondled her small head, he said with a laugh, Meng Meng, do you miss your mother? Of course. Your mama has prepared a very mysterious gift for you. She said it's so beautiful that you definitely will like it, but she will have to wait for 3 days to bring it back. Zhang Han started coaxing her. At the beginning, when Meng Meng heard there was a mysterious gift for her, her eyes brightened. However, she became unhappy when she learned that her mama would not come back for 3 more days. Under the guidance of Zhang Han, she finally diverted her attention towards the mysterious gift and cheered up. However, the situation was not that simple, and Xian would come back in 3 days. Jia Dong invited Xian and Zif to a drinking party that night, and Linji showed up inadvertently. He invited everyone to a private club for entertainment at the end of the dinner. For the sake of Jia Dong's hospitality, Xian and Zif joined them. There were more than a dozen people seated with them. Although Xian rarely spoke, Both Lin Ji's words and other people's comments showed that Lin Ji wanted to pursue Xian. At midnight, Liu Feng invited them to go to a nightclub, but Xian directly refused this time. The next day, Jia Dong invited them again. At this point, Xian and Zuf faintly realized his true intention, so they kindly refused. On the third day, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Xian and Zuf left the hotel and prepared to go to the TV station not far away to record the program. However, as soon as they walked out of the hotel, a group of more than 20 reporters swarmed them, surrounding Xian and Zuf. "What are you doing? Excuse me." The crowd was in so much chaos that Zuf failed to force her way through even though she constantly pushed forward. Meanwhile, the three men who were going to pick them up also did not rush in. It was a scene filled with utter chaos. Just then, 5 cars stopped along the side of the road. The 2 cars in the front and the back were solid black Cadillacs, while the one in the middle was a Rolls-Royce Phantom. Lin Ji, dressed in a black Dior suit, got out of the Rolls-Royce. In the meantime, more than 10 bodyguards got out of the other 4 cars. "Let's go over and take a look," Lin Ji said as he took the lead and began walking in their direction. As they approached, Lin Ji raised his hand and gestured to the bodyguards behind him. "Get out of the way. I'll give you 10 seconds. Get out of the way." The several bodyguards who took the lead berated and pushed a few reporters at the backside away. At this moment, everyone looked over and was startled when they realized what was happening, then hurried back. "Xian, are you okay?" Lin Ji walked towards Xian in a hurry and asked with great concern. "I'm fine." Xian shook her head slightly, bending to pick up the hat that had fallen during the chaos. "What kind of arrangements did Xia Dong make? I'll ask him later." Lin Ji frowned and said with a hint of blame, what he did was enough to convince most people that he was concerned about Xian, and that his concern was being revealed inadvertently. However, in truth, these reporters were all called here by Jia Dong, who obeyed his orders. There was no denying that life was like a drama, and everything depended on how well one performed. At this moment, Lin Ji looked at Xian and said with a smile, "Follow me, I'm going to the TV station as well." After he finished speaking, Li Ji lifted his hand, intending to pat Xian on the shoulder and comfort her. However, Xian immediately stepped away and escaped from his reach. She glanced at Lin Ji and coldly said, "Thank you, child Lin. It's my pleasure." Lin Ji pulled his hand back, glanced at Zif, and said, "Let's get in the car." After he finished speaking, Lin Ji took the lead and headed towards the Rolls-Royce. Zif and Xian followed him to the car, where Lin Ji opened the rear door and politely gestured for them to get in. Xian nodded her head gently, and then proceeded to get in. Lin Ji had planned to get in next. But the instant he raised his leg, Zif moved forward, then smiled and said, "It's so kind of you to open the door for us. Thank you, child Lin." After she said this, Zif got in as well. Xian moved beside the window when she saw Zif got in, which left Zif seated in the middle. Lin Ji's mouth trembled slightly when he saw what Zif did. What a strong risk awareness she had. He had not planned to try anything in the car. "Hey, child Lin, why don't you get in? Come on, it's too hot outside." Zif quickly waved for him to sit on her left side. Outwardly, Zif was enthusiastic, but she snorted inwardly. "You wanted to sit next to elder sister Yan? HMPH, dream on. Okay." Lin Ji got in the car helplessly. After that, they drove to the TV station that was not far away. Lin Ji sat in the back seat while thinking for a while, then smiled and said, "Xian, let me introduce you. The man sitting in the passenger seat is Wai Zhao." "Oh?" Zif and Xian had a strange expression on their faces as they looked at him. "Ha, ha, ha." Wai Zhao took off his sunglasses, then turned towards them and reached out his hand. At this point, he smiled and said, "Hello, Xian, I've heard a lot about you." "Hello," Xian responded while shaking his hand. "Hello." Wai Zhao also shook hands with Zif. "Miss Zif, can you take off your sunglasses?" Wai Zhao asked. Xian glanced at him and took off her sunglasses. "You're very beautiful." Wai Zhao's eye lit up as he said, "You are a beauty that lives up to your reputation, and you're even more beautiful than in the photos. More importantly, Miss Z, your temperament is very good. It's quite rare." "Thanks," Xian answered, then nodded her head gently. "I swear it's true, Miss Z. Although it isn't suitable to talk about business here, I can't help mentioning that I'm preparing to make a movie with an investment of 80 million yuan in the near future. It will be based in ancient times, and I think Miss Z would fit well in some of the roles. How is your current schedule? Would it be possible for us to work together?" Wai Zhao put on a sincere look. However, he paid attention to Lin Ji's expression from the corner of his eyes. Everything he said was empty talk. Although he was going to shoot a movie, it was only 30 million yuan. Moreover, all the roles had been confirmed, from the female leading role, all the way down to the actors in the background. It was all just talk. Even if Xian agreed and showed up, she would not get a part and would even face heavy losses. While speaking, Wai Zhao felt uncomfortable. He did not like using sneaky and underhanded tactics, but he could not afford to offend Child Lin since he was one of the investors. Wai Zhao, therefore, could only run errands for him. In the face of Wai Zhao's question, Zif remained expressionless because these matters were always decided by elder sister Yan. As for Xian, she became silent. After a while, she shook her head and said, "Thank you for your kindness, Mr. Y. However, I probably won't have the time. I'll be returning to Hong Kong after I finish recording today's show. If Mr. Y wants to cooperate with me, you can contact the Royal Entertainment Company." What a pity. Wai Zhao chuckled and displayed a regretful look. When he shook his head and was about to give up, Lin Ji gave him a glare. Then he looked at Xian again with narrowed eyes and said, "I will contact Royal Entertainment Company then, because Mrs. is really quite suitable for one of the roles in my movie." After arriving at the TV station and getting out of the car, Wai Zhao shared a few words with Xian passionately. He could not have seemed more sincere. What he said somewhat confused Xian. It seemed that there actually was a role that fit her. If so, it was indeed an opportunity for her. However, Xian did not want to promise him directly. Instead, she decided to make some alternate plans after she recorded today's program and returned to Hong Kong. However, her plan backfired on her. At 2:30 in the afternoon, the program began to record. Unexpectedly, when the recording was halfway through, the host suddenly held his stomach and left the scene. After a while, word came that the host had gone to the hospital and the program would be delayed for 2 days. Xian told Zhang Han the news, and she clearly understood that Meng was unhappy by her voice on the phone, which made Xian feel anxious. "Miss Z, I'm so sorry, the host has relapsed and has to be treated for 2 days. He'll be discharged from the hospital the day after tomorrow," Jia Dong said with regret. "It doesn't matter." Xian shook her head gently. "I'll ask someone to send you back to the hotel first, and I'll arrange a few bodyguards for you tomorrow. They will be responsible for your safety when you are out," Jia Dong said to Xian as he took the lead in leaving the studio. However, right after they walked out, they saw Lin Ji standing in front of the studio, well-dressed and holding a bouquet of roses. On seeing them coming out, Lin Ji smiled and walked over, then said, "Xian, beautiful flowers should be given to a beautiful woman. I hope you like them. Will you join me for dinner?" Chapter 233. Don't you like roses? At this time, the people who were passing by stopped and looked over, then praised him repeatedly. "Wow, is he trying to court her? I don't know, but that woman looks so beautiful. Look how nice the man is. He sends her flowers even on normal days. My boyfriend never sends me roses." Some of the people in the crowd were sharper. After glancing at Lin Ji several times, they finally realized who he was, so they could not help gasping. "Holy shit, isn't that Child Lin from the Lin family? Yeah, that's him. I didn't expect to see Child Lin today. It's the first time I've heard of young Master Lin sending a woman roses. Who is that beautiful woman? If Child Lin has taken a liking to her, then she will have a very bright future." All of the surrounding people were talking about it. There were many girls who envied Xian very much. If they could get Child Lin's favor, they would have a chance to marry into the upper class. Who did not want to become a rich lady? However, Linji could not see Xian's eyes because they were hidden behind her sunglasses. He thought about it and added, I don't mean much by it. I don't know what kinds of flowers you like, so I choose roses to express my feelings. I only hope to have dinner with you. Of course, if you don't trust me, Miss Zhu can join us. Linji felt that although it was impossible to chase after her directly, she would still agree to go to dinner with him considering his status and her current situation. But he was wrong. Even when faced with his smiling eyes, Xian answered straightforwardly. Sorry, I don't like roses, and I still have some business to deal with after going back to the hotel, so I won't accompany Child Lin for dinner. Child Jia, please take us back. Huh? The smile on Linji's face faded a little. Being rejected to his face made him a little unhappy. After Xian began to speak, Linji glanced at Jia Dong. At this time, how could Jia Dong dare to go against him? He laughed bitterly and said, well, the person I arranged does not seem to be here. How about this, Brother Lin? Can you help me send Xian back to the hotel? After hearing those words, there was a hint of satisfaction in Linji's eyes. Just as he was about to say something, Zif responded by saying, then don't bother Child Lin. The hotel is just over there. It's only a 7 or 8 minute walk from here. I'll walk there with elder sister Yan. How could that be acceptable? Jia Dong hurried to speak. It's no problem, I just go for a short walk. Xian said softly, Child Lin, Child Jia, we will leave first. When she finished speaking, Xian took the lead and headed outside. Linji shook his head with a faint smile. He waved his hand and motioned towards the driver standing in front of the Rolls-Royce driver's seat at the back, then said, Nanshan, take Miss Zi back to the hotel and don't let those reporters disturb them. Yes. The driver with the crew cut nodded, then waved and left with 8 of his men. They followed Xian and escorted them back. Seeing this, Jia Dong shook his head helplessly and stared at Nanshan's back. He knew that Nanshan, the driver and bodyguard, was a true expert. In their circle, sometimes the quality of a bodyguard could indirectly indicate someone's status. Some people only hired ordinary bodyguards and some hired people who were true experts, such as people who retired from the special forces and people from security companies. But a scion like Linji would usually hire people of higher rank. People from the martial arts world. Jia Dong had heard of people who practiced martial arts. He knew that many well-known and wealthy people had such bodyguards. If someone could hire bodyguards at that level, it indicated that they were part of the upper class. And he, Jia Dong, was not so good after all. Linji looked at Xian's back and smiled faintly. He tossed the flowers in front of him and murmured softly. It's getting more and more interesting. So I'll play this game with you slowly and see how long you can hold out. Ha ha. After that, he took his cell phone out of his pocket and called a number in Hong Kong. Hey, Cheng Dong, is Xian an actress in your company? At the same time, on the beach near Mount New Moon, after more than 3 days of training, the results had gradually been revealed. Ha ha ha, 520 kilograms. I broke through too. Many people stood in front of the dynamometer, testing themselves one by one. Xiong was the first, with a test result of 526 kilograms, and Elder Meng was the second, with a test result of 512 kilograms. The laughter just now came from Ahu, whose strength was 520 kilograms. After him, there were 12 men whose strengths exceeded 470 kilograms. The other men's strengths ranged from 380 to 450 kilograms. As for the 6 women, after training, their strengths were just above 300 kilograms. Of course, this strength did not mean their muscle strength, but the punch strength of their right fist. The punch strength of an ordinary person's right fist could reach 100 to 150 kilograms. In the past, there was a famous boxing champion whose highest punch strength with his right fist reached more than 800 kilograms, which was enough to knock a cow over. That was to say, the impact strength of his punch, but his muscle strength was only a little over 220 kilograms. The measurements for strengths were only general concepts. Now, everybody begin to practice Canyon gymnastics. Zhao Feng nodded satisfactorily and said, "Brother Feng, take the test." Ahu said curiously, "Yeah, Brother Feng, give it a try." Xuyong and others also jeered, "Then I'll give it a try." Zhao Feng smiled and went to the dynamometer. Whoosh! He exerted all of his strength with his right fist and pulled back his arm, then immediately hit the dynamometer ball. Bang! A muffled noise was heard, but it seemed like the whole machine was shaking. At that moment, everyone looked up at the numbers on it and could not help gasping. Hiss! My God, Brother Feng, it says 1,800 kilograms. Oh, my God, it's over 1,000 kilograms more than ours. It's amazing. Brother Feng is so cool. Everyone started screaming. Zhao Feng looked at these uproarious people. He gradually raised his chin, then waved his hand and lightly said, "This is the result of my recent training. You will break through 1,000 kilograms in a few days if you try hard and practice Canyon gymnastics. Then what are we waiting for? Let's get started." Ahu said anxiously, "Stand still and I'll show you how to do it. You all should focus on doing it formally and holding it as long as you can. Every extra second represents a huge breakthrough." Zhao Feng began to command. Royal Entertainment Company, Makey's office. Who told them to stay in Shangjing? What's going on? How did they get on another show? Li Cheng clapped the table and shouted out angrily after hearing the news. "I called Zuf at noon. She said that it was Jia Dong, the son of the TV station's chief operator, who arranged the show. The recording started today, but the host relapsed during the recording, so they had to wait for several days for her to be discharged before they can finish the recording," Makey said with a bitter laugh. She also did not expect Xian to get such an opportunity when she went to Shangjing, and she felt in her heart that she was very lucky. Li Cheng spent a lot to let the three mentors, Jiang, Yuan, and Tai, do things for him, but it all resulted in the three mentors being fired. When they arrived in Shangjing, Li Cheng made some more arrangements, but just got scoffed at. Now, Xian was going to be on the primetime show My Voice. God favored Xian too much, didn't she? Recording what? Immediately call Zuf and have them fly back tonight. Just say there is work to them. Li Cheng waved. Okay. When Li Cheng was upset, Makey would be extremely obedient. She would do whatever he said. Therefore, at this time, after hearing what he said, she directly dialed Zuf's phone. "Zuf, I am not criticizing you, but did Xian not plan to talk to me about that show she is going to be in? You are more popular now, so you can just ignore me. I'm telling you now, go back to Hong Kong right away, tonight. You have important work to do tomorrow." As she spoke, Makey's eyes suddenly froze. She suddenly stood up and lost her voice. What are you talking about? Fu Shan's coming over to discuss business? You can't leave yet. That's it. Makey hung up the phone directly. She took a deep breath, looked at Li Cheng and said, "Child Li, things seem to be getting more complicated. Xian also wants to come back, but they can't for the moment. Fu Shan is talking about working with Xian for something in film and television. How could that be possible?" Li Cheng couldn't stay calm any longer. He stood up and looked gloomy. Fu Shan was the director of the film and television department, who generally spent his time inside the company. How could he possibly go to Shangjing in person? It was Boss Wu himself who gave the order, Makey said somewhat weakly. "Wu Chengdong?" Li Cheng's face trembled slightly. He bit his teeth, then walked towards the door and angrily said, "I'll go ask him about it." Wu Chengdong was the CEO of the Royal Entertainment Company and one of the board members who was very close to his father. In terms of identity, Wu Chengdong was Li Cheng's elder, and, according to status, Wu Chengdong was at the same level as his father. Now that he had made a move, Li Cheng had a bad feeling in his heart. After leaving Meiqi's office, he rushed all the way to Wu Chengdong's office. Li Cheng tried to calm down and knocked on the door. Dong, dong, dong. Come in. Li Cheng opened the door and went in. It's Xiaoqing, sit down. Wu Chengdong nodded towards Li Cheng. Wu Chengdong was 45 years old. He had big eyes and thick eyebrows, with some pockmarks on his cheeks. He wore a suit and had the unique temperament of a CEO. What's the matter? Wu Chengdong asked directly. Here's the problem. Li Cheng pondered and then said the words he prepared on his way here. It's about Xian. Isn't she a subordinate of Meiqi? In these past few days, Meiqi has arranged for her. You don't need to say any more. Wu Chengdong directly interrupted him and said, she will be staying in Shangjing for a month or two, maybe even longer. But why? Li Cheng somewhat lost his calm and frowned slightly. Ha ha ha. Wu Chengdong smiled and shook his head. He stood up, went to Li Cheng, clapped him on the shoulder, and said meaningfully, Xian is indeed a beautiful woman. A gentleman would like to marry a fair lady, so I understand, but sometimes you have to take the long view. Don't think about Xian for the time being. Uncle Wu, please just tell me. Li Cheng said, somewhat unconvinced. Wu Chengdong gave him a faint smile and slowly said, I wonder if you've heard of Linji from Shangjing. Chapter 234, I'll pick you up. Which Linji? Li Cheng was a little puzzled and asked doubtfully. In Shangjing, there are only a few people who can be surnamed Lin. How many people with that name do you think there are? Wu Chengdong smiled and said. After hearing these words, Li Cheng seemed to think of something. His expression became a little stiff and cried out. The Shangjing Lins, the oldest son of the Lin family, Linji, one of the famous four scions of Shangjing, Linji. Exactly. Wu Chengdong nodded. This. Li Cheng looked a little pale. There was a burst of pain in his heart, in his eye. Xian belongs to him, but now that she was being eyed by Linji, didn't that mean he had no chance? How much did he spend on this trip for Xian? Now the ripening fruit was about to be picked by someone else. Li Cheng felt pain in his heart as he spoke with a sense of dejection. So, Xian can't come back in the near future? Generally speaking, that's true. Wu Chengdong shook his head slightly and said, but nothing is absolute. It's possible that, since she is quite stubborn and resolute, she may come back earlier. But it also depends on Linji and what methods he is willing to use on her. Now that Linji has called me, it means it's something important to him, so I can only cooperate with him, and... Wu Chengdong thought for a moment, then patted Li Cheng on the shoulder again and said meaningfully, sometimes a beautiful woman is just a plaything, just like a toy. When you get tired of it, you will look for a new toy, but just because one person no longer wants it doesn't mean someone else can't have it. I think you know what I mean. Ah, well, I see, Uncle Wu, I'll go back first. Li Cheng left while radiating a lonely demeanor. He felt like someone had stolen food out of his, and he would not get it back until after it had been tasted by others. He had gone to great efforts, but he was only going to end up with the leftovers, which made him feel very upset. However, his status could not be compared with that of Linji. But, even though there were policies that had to be followed, there were also countermeasures. Li Cheng left the company using the elevator. Then, once he got in his car, he called Xian. Xian, it's Li Cheng. Why haven't I seen you in the last few days? I inquired about you and found out you have business in Shangjing. I heard some information. It seems like you're in a tough situation. There's someone named Linji. 2 minutes later, Xian hung up the phone. She glanced at Zif, who was in front of her, and her eyebrows wrinkled slightly. At this moment, how could she not know what Linji was thinking? Just now, Fu Shan called to say that he would arrive in Shangjing tomorrow to talk with Wai Zhao about cooperating together and Xian's role. which would take another few days. More importantly, because of those media reporters at the front door, Linji kindly arranged 8 bodyguards for Xian. They were standing at the door waiting for orders at any time, which gave Xian the feeling that they were not just there for her protection. Elder sister Yan, that child Lin must be infatuated with you. He's arranged programs for you, as well as some movies and TV shows. It's a pity that I, Zif, already have a brother-in-law. Besides Xian, Zif curled her lips and sighed. It's not that simple. Xian shook her head gently. It's not that complicated. Child Lin has taken a fancy to you, so he's providing you with resources to express his love. It's normal. Zif was somewhat doubtful because she did not know what Xian meant. I'm talking about what's happening with the programs and TV shows. Director Fu is coming to talk about the contract. It feels like Linji is leading me by the nose. I don't like it. Xian frowned slightly. She didn't like the feeling of being manipulated. So what should we do? Fu Shan is coming here in person, and this contract will definitely be negotiated. Zif thought for a moment and said, I've decided, we will not discuss the film and television contract with him. The day after tomorrow, after recording the program, we will immediately go back to Hong Kong. The expression in Xian's eyes changed and became somewhat firm. It was faint, but she also felt a slight threat from Linji. With what Zhang Han had said to her before, she made up her mind that no matter what it took, she would go back to Hong Kong after recording the program. While they were talking, someone knocked on the door. Zif went to open the door, only to see the well-dressed Linji with a smile on his face, holding a handful of champagne roses. The light pink roses would have been absolutely adorable in normal times, but Xian didn't even look at them. Child Lin. Zif smiled and greeted him. Even if she didn't like him in her heart, she still had to observe common courtesy on the surface. Linji nodded and thought about it. He put the roses on the tea table, then smiled and said, You haven't eaten yet and it's almost 6 o'clock. Shall we go out for dinner? I booked a spot at Love Lucy's restaurant. I heard they are serving Kobe beef there today. Miss Zip, why don't we go and taste it together? In the upper class, people paid more attention to the quality of food, such as the world-famous Kobe beef. It was ranked 5A, which made it one of the most popular delicacies of the wealthy. They could not eat it every day because of its slow production. Faced with Linji's invitation, Xian did not even think about it. She just shook her head and said, Sorry child Lin, I've been recording all afternoon. I'm a little tired, so I want to stay in the hotel and rest. I won't be able to accompany child Lin. So it's like that, Linji said with an artificial sigh of regret. Well, it seems that I won't be able to have dinner with you ladies. In that case, I'll have some food brought up later. Miss Zin, Miss Zhu, you can rest here. If there's anything you need, please tell the people at the door at any time. I'll leave you alone. Okay, thank you, child Lin. Zif smiled and moved to send Linji out of the door. She looked at him and said, Child Lin, take care. Bang. When the door closed, the smile on Zif's face instantly disappeared. She turned and sat down beside Xian, stretching as she said, Hey, it's going to be hard for us to go out with him acting like that. Outside the room, the smile on Linji's face faded. He glanced at the door, shook his head slightly, and murmured softly, It's getting more and more interesting. Then he turned and left. For him, the chase was just another part of the game, and he was bound to be the winner. After about 2 hours later, someone knocked on Xian's door once again. This time it was a clean-dressed cook. Not only was he a foreign cook, he was the chief cook of the Love Lucy's restaurant. He came here personally and made 2 steaks, 2 seafood pizzas, and some snacks for both of them. He even brought a bottle of 82 Lafite, which was worth more than 100,000 yuan. It was a very expensive dinner. He came here to prepare the food himself, so Xian could not refuse. In the end, they just sat back and enjoyed it. The steak was Kobe beef, after all, although it was not as good as the meat dishes Zhang Han cooked for them. It was not much worse, so it was the most delicious meal they had eaten since they came here. On the next day, Linji did not appear, but at noon someone sent a handful of flowers. This time it was a large number of flowers known as the Blue Enchantress. Above the flowers, there was a small card with a handwritten note from Linji. May Miss Z, who is more beautiful than this flower, have a happy day. In the afternoon, Fu Shan took two of his entourage over for a face-to-face interview and simply asked Zuf about the program. After learning that the next program would be recorded the following day, the three of them left immediately. Xian and Zuf decided to stay in the hotel room and had no intention of going out. On the other side where Zhang Han was, something interesting happened at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. You're the owner of this restaurant, aren't you? Three young people swaggered in, and the thin-faced man who took the lead asked haughtily. Yeah? Zhang Han gave a bland response. Ha ha. The thin-faced man sneered and said, I'm the cook of Aslan Restaurant. Our Aslan Restaurant is a 2-star Michelin restaurant. We watched the program about your restaurant, but it was just propaganda, completely false and too exaggerated. You're just trying to cheat customers. So our chief cook, Lu Zhao, has decided to invite you to a competition the day after tomorrow, this weekend. I hope you can show some real skills so that your loss won't be too ugly. As he spoke, he put an invitation letter on the table, then turned around and left quietly. However, if he had come 2 hours earlier and displayed that attitude, he would have been criticized by the restaurant guests. Ha ha. Zhang Han picked up the invitation letter, but he wasn't even slightly interested in looking at it. He flicked his finger and tossed the invitation letter into the trash. Papa, what are they doing here? Meng asked, somewhat puzzled. Maybe there is something wrong with their heads. The next afternoon, Xian and Zuf went to the TV station again to record the program. When they exited this time, good God, there were more than 30 people in front of the door that rushed towards them. All of them were either taking photos or holding a microphone while trying to get an interview. This time, many of them were not media reporters who had been hired to come here. They had a keen sense for when something interesting was going on. With so many reporters coming to block Xian, there must be something going on, so the scene became like this. Fortunately, the bodyguards arranged by Linji were very professional. Because of them, they were able to get in the car smoothly. From the time they arrived at the TV station until 5:30, the program was successfully recorded. Xian directly refused the dinner invitation and returned to the hotel. Upon returning, she had to book a flight out that evening. Before she could inform Zhang Han, Fu Shan arrived. Xian, get ready, we'll be having dinner with Child Lin and Director Y at 7 o'clock. Fu Shan said directly. Dinner? Xian shook her head and refused. Excuse me, Director Fu, but I've booked an 8 o'clock flight. We're going back to Hong Kong. What are you saying? Fu Shan's face was abruptly severe. He said in an indisputable tone, go refund your ticket. I'll give you half an hour to prepare. We'll leave on time at 6:30. Xian's face turned cold after she heard the words. She faced him directly and said, Director Fu, you can talk about the cooperation by yourself. As for me, I will be going back to Hong Kong tonight. Huh? Fu Shan frowned. It was obvious that he was a little angry because his fat cheeks shook. He glared at Xian angrily and said in a sullen tone, What, have your wings already hardened? I still have my freedom. I'm just an actress in the company, not a prisoner. Xian replied very stiffly and looked at Fu Shan coldly. Ha ha ha, freedom. Fu Shan burst out laughing, then stopped and said coldly, Xian, let's be clear about your position and situation. I'm currently going to arrange a job for you, but you're being so picky. Do you think you are still popular? You're wrong. Don't you know that you're even worse off than a third-rate actor? The company is willing to use some of its resource to help you develop, but not only are you ungrateful, you even refuse. Is this something you can refuse? I think I have the right to refuse, and these aren't even resources given to me by the company. As the director, don't you already know all the details? Ziyan argued tit for tat with a firm attitude. Well, I didn't expect you to have such a stubborn temper. You don't even respect me, the director, do you? Fu Shan trembled with rage and said, don't forget that you signed a 3-year contract with our company. With your attitude, I can leave you out in the cold. Do you understand? Then try it. Ziyan rose violently and said in a cold voice. Hearing those words, Fu Shan was stunned. Ziyan's tough attitude was somewhat unexpected, but it made him even angrier. He had many ways to deal with disobedient staff, but he did not want to quarrel right now, nor did he want to sever ties with her completely, so he softened his tone and said, Ziyan, I'll tell you, this cooperation is very important for us, and Boss Wu ordered it personally, otherwise, I wouldn't have come here myself. Now is not the time for you to show off your temper. If Boss Wu is unhappy, no one in the Royal Entertainment Company would be able to protect you. After hearing that, Ziyan's eyes flickered slightly. She also did not realize that Fu Shan came over due to Wu Chengdong's order. She just wasn't sure whether it really was Boss Wu's order or if he was just trying to take advantage of someone else's authority. It was Zif who could not bear it any longer. At this time, she stood up and said, don't you use Boss Wu to force us. You know what, it's useless. We are going back today. We must go back. Even if the Emperor came, he would also have to get out of our way. Zif's words made Fu Shan's eyes widen gradually. Did they want to rebel? Fu Shan couldn't suppress the fire in his heart. Just before Zif finished speaking, Ziyan interrupted, Fei, you don't need to say any more than that. In half an hour we'll go to the appointment. Upon hearing those words, Fu Shan, who was just about to lose his temper, paused. Then he laughed and said, it's about time. This is also a chance for you. You need to be far-sighted. I'll be next door. Call me when you're ready. After that, he left the room directly. Elder sister Yan. Zif frowned, then said, somewhat indignantly, they're clearly bullying us. Since they want to have dinner, let's go. I'll see what they can do. Ziyan answered coldly. With that, they arrived at the evening banquet on time. There were about 8 or 9 people. In addition to the 2 staff members who came with Fu Shan, there were several of Wai Zhao's men. After seeing Ziyan's appearance, all of them praised her, saying that she was very suitable for some of the roles. And, naturally, Lin Ji was busy looking for opportunities to communicate and chat with Ziyan, but Ziyan's face remained cold. She didn't even give serious answers, only replying with an arrow with complete disinterest. Everyone could see it, and Fu Shan even winked at Ziyan repeatedly, but she just ignored him. This caused Lin Ji's good mood to gradually disappear. He was already a little impatient. At this time, Ziyan opened her mouth and stood up to say her first full sentence since her arrival. Thanks to Child Lin for his hospitality. However, I'm not feeling well, so I'll leave first. After that, Ziyan took another look at Fu Shan and said coldly, oh, by the way, Director Fu, my flight has been rescheduled at 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. I have some business to do when I get back, so I will have to leave everything regarding the cooperation to you. After that, Ziyan and Zuf left directly, leaving behind a table of people staring blankly. Well, Fu Shan's face was grim and he was very angry in his heart, but he had to smile at Lin Ji and say, sorry, Child Lin. Ziyan seems to be feeling a little uncomfortable these past few days, so she. Oh, well, that's understandable. Lin Ji gave a faint laugh, then shook his head and said, but I don't think you can talk with me about the cooperation if she's not here. What do you think? Yes, Child Lin is right. She's definitely not going back. I'll talk to her tomorrow. When Fu Shan saw Lin Ji's unhappy eyes, he was almost covered in cold sweat. If he offended Lin Ji, he would be left with a very bad feeling. At this time, he was ready to explode. Lin Ji, however, was impatient and even in a bad mood. Ziyan, you're just a star. How dare you refuse me? Lin Ji, you really don't know who you are? It's your honor for someone like me. Lin Ji, to take a fancy to you. In that case, it seems that I don't have to be polite anymore. For Linji, even a scion like Zhang Han could be destroyed by him if he was willing to use certain methods, let alone a star. He had many ways to deal with Xian. Since gentle ways had no effect, then he would try something else. But Xian's cool expression aroused Linji's desire to conquer. There were no more words spoken that night. At 1 o'clock the next afternoon, Xian and Zuf were ready to leave. But just as they opened the door and walked out, one of the 8 bodyguards standing on both sides of the door stood in the way. "What are you doing?" Zif raised her eyebrows and questioned him. "Sorry, Mr. Fushan orders, you can't leave here for now." The man replied blandly. "Is he your father? Do you do whatever he says? Get out of the way." Zif said with a cold hum. "Without Mr. Fushan's order, you can't leave." The man answered again. "Fei, call the police." Xian frowned and said coldly, "Yeah, we should just call the police. Do you know that what you are doing now is illegal?" Zif angrily took out her mobile phone, ready to make a call. "Ha ha," the man said with a sneer, "call the police, go ahead, it's useless, you are Mr. Fushan's actresses, it's legal to talk about cooperation and arrange your schedule, don't be so naive." "That's right." Suddenly, a voice of applause and praise was heard. They looked around, only to see the fat Fushan come over with a sneer on his face. As he drew near, he said with a false smile, "Xian, come on, go inside and we'll have a talk." Seeing this, Zif put down her mobile phone and returned to the room with Xian. Fushan came in and slammed the door. "Director Fu, you have a very underhanded way of doing things," Zif said coldly. "Shut up, you're in no position to talk to me." Fushan cried coldly and glanced at them, then said, "Am I being underhanded or are you putting on airs too early, huh? Who do you think you are? Do you really think you're special? What happened to you last night? You have been in entertainment circle for so many years, don't you even understand the rules? Are you stupid? I don't understand what you were thinking. What were you trying to do? What are you shouting about?" Zif's temper also got worse as she stared at him, ready to cuss him out. At this time, Xian interrupted him with a chilly tone and said, "Don't waste time talking to him about principles, Director Fu. What are you planning to do? If you do that again, I will defend my rights and interests using legal methods." "Legal methods? Great, that's okay." With a loud laugh, Fushan took out a document from his briefcase and threw it on the tea table. He sneered, "Take a good look at this indictment. If you leave today, the indictment will come into operation. At that time, you will have to pay nearly 100 million in liquidation damages. With your current standing, there's no way you can pay the money back. You're going too far." Xian's face was completely cold. She was very angry in her heart. At the same time, she became increasingly disappointed in the Royal Entertainment Company, and Zif's face went pale with anger. Remembering the original contract, she also felt somewhat helpless. When Fushan saw them become silent, his tone softened a little, and he began to play the good guy. "Xian, I also know it may be a bit unfair, but there is no other way. This cooperation has to continue. You are anxious to go back to Hong Kong and I don't know what's going on. If you're in a hurry, why don't you wait for 2 days, okay? I'll directly finalize the contract in 1 or 2 days. If possible, I'll try to give you a short vacation. Is that okay?" Looking at Fushan's features, Zif really wanted to say, "Don't be so hypocritical, how disgusting." But she knew that people can't fight City Hall, so she just kept her mouth shut, even though it felt uncomfortable to hold her words in. At this time, Xian's cell phone suddenly rang. When she picked it up, it was Meki. After thinking about it, Xian picked up the phone. "Hello. Xian, I heard about what happened to you over there. Although I didn't pay much attention to you lately, you're still one of my people. How could you be bullied? If that Fushan is rude to you, don't give him any face. I'll take responsibility, but this matter is still somewhat difficult to deal with. As for the contract, read it carefully and sign it if you think it's okay. Tomorrow or the day after tomorrow at the latest, I'll arrange for you to come back. When you guys come back, the matter of the cooperation will be fine. Thank you, elder system." At this moment, Xian's cold heart was relieved a little. It's all right. After all, we've known each other for many years, and our feelings have always been there, so that's it. Pay more attention to what's going on around you, Maki said before she hung up the phone. This sentence was said sincerely. In fact, if it had not been for Li Cheng, Maki intended to develop Xian well, but there would always be situations that people were helpless against. She chose her own career, so she had to give up many other things. After answering the phone, Xian looked at Fu Shan and said coldly, "Bring the contract to me as soon as possible. You'll have to wait for several days." Fu Shan gave her a strange look, wondering what Maki said to her. He thought about it, but said nothing more and immediately left. At this time, Zif was very angry and uncomfortable. She angrily took out her mobile phone and made a phone call. "Hello, brother-in-law. Elder sister Yan and I are being bullied. Isn't Shangjing your former territory, brother-in-law? Hurry up and find someone to help us." Upon hearing those words, Zhang Han took Meng Meng out of his arms and put her on the sofa to let the little fellow watch cartoons by herself. After doing that, he went to the restaurant window with a cold look growing in his eyes as he said, "Speak, I'll tell you, brother-in-law." Just as Zif was about to complain, Xian reached out and said, "Let me tell him." "Okay," Zif said, "I'll let elder sister Yan tell you herself." After that, she handed Xian her cell phone. "Zhang Han." Xian pouted her lips, with some grievance in her tone. "I'll pick you up." At that moment, Zhang Han answered with these 4 words, simply and neatly. Chapter 235, Unleash the Tiger. Clatter. Hearing Zhang Han's words, Xian felt warmth inside. Her eyes softened and her voice became lower as she said, "It's not that serious. The superiors of the company won't let us go, so we can't leave until I sign the contract in a couple." "What contract is it?" Zhang Han asked. "It's a contract for a movie and television show. The director is Wai Zhao and Linji is one of the investors. They called Director Fu, one of the top executive, and brought him over to negotiate with us since they want to cooperate with me. However, Director Fu won't let us leave, but don't worry, we'll go back the day after tomorrow," Xian said while pouting. "Brother-in-law, they're bullying us!" Zif shouted from the side. She was shouting so loudly that Zhang Han could hear. He knew that this affair was not as simple as Xian said. "Is someone trying to humiliate you?" Zhang Han shook his head slightly and said, "Then I'm going to book a flight tonight." No. Xian was really looking forward to the moment when Zhang Han came to pick her up. But she had to take all the factors into consideration. Therefore, Xian said, "Even if you come here by plane, Meng Meng would be tired after such a long fight. Besides, I've attracted the media's full attention at the moment. If they're aware of Meng Meng, she won't be able to go wherever she wants to. I still haven't decided to tell everyone about Meng Meng, and there's no reason for you to come here." Xian suddenly blurted out, "I have nothing to do with you, so it will cause a lot of confusion if you come." After saying that, Xian suddenly froze. "What are you saying, Xian?" As for Zhang Han, he slowly said, "You're Meng Meng's mother, and I'm Meng Meng's father." What did he mean? Did he just acknowledge me as his wife? Xian began to fill her mind with nonsense again. There is no translation for this line, so I winged it. However, it won't let me add it. I'll leave what I have for now here in case I need it later. "Hey, elder sister Yan, what you're saying isn't right. Let me talk to my brother-in-law." When Zif noticed that Xian was somewhat speechless, she grabbed the phone and scornfully said, "Brother-in-law, I and elder sister Yan are being bullied. There are people outside our room that won't let us leave. The director is trying to force us, but there isn't anything you can do right now, so you have to get revenge for us later." "Ah, that's okay, that's good." Zif was slightly stunned, so she hung up after responding. What did he say? Xian asked with curiosity. Brother-in-law said. Zhou smiled and slowly said, he'll send someone to pick us up, so we can go back tomorrow. Moreover, brother-in-law said that his men will bully the people who bullied us. He's so arbitrary. Xian snorted, then remembered the time Zhang Han said that if a dog bit him he would directly stew it. As she thought back to that, a faint smile appeared in Xian's beautiful eyes. She felt how wonderful it was to have someone to fall back on. On the other side, Zhang Han was sitting in front of the window. After he hung up the phone, his face fell as indifference filled his eyes. Did someone bully Meng Meng's mother? Although he had not yet been with Xian, she was slowly stepping her way into Zhang Han's heart. He admitted that he cared about Xian, which was why Zhao Feng's proposal to have some bodyguards for Xian had aroused his interest. Zhang Han had been impatient over the fact that Xian had not come back for nearly a week. Now, Zhao Feng. Zhang Han's eyes narrowed as he dialed Zhao Feng's number, after which, he only said a few words. Right now, come to the restaurant immediately. After he finished saying that, Zhang Han hung up the phone. On the other side on the beach, there were 20 people constantly practicing Canyon gymnastics. The other 30 people, all of whom had broken through to the obvious strength stage, had continued training in fighting techniques for the past 2 days and completely mastered this power. Zhao Feng broke through to the inward strength stage 2 days ago. When Zhao Feng broke through to the inward strength stage, he was so glad that he instantly ran back to Mount New Moon and fought with Dai. However, in the end, Zhao Feng was beaten and felt really depressed. However, he cheered up when he realized that he was only knocked back 3 to 4 meters when he was pushed by Dai. It was still great progress since he only fell back 3 to 4 meters now. After all, he had previously stepped back 7 to 8 meters. At this moment, he was busy practicing various movements, but the phone in his backpack behind him rang out all of a sudden. Zhao Feng walked over and found out it was his master, so he put on a solemn look and quickly picked up the phone. After Zhao Feng heard what Zhang Han said, his face fell. It was the first time he had heard such a serious voice from Zhang Han. Something must have happened. Zhao Feng's heart almost jumped out of his chest. He turned slowly and said, Xuyong, take over the training here, I have to leave now. After he finished speaking, Zhao Feng did not give them a chance to ask questions. He directly picked up his coat and hurried out without changing his clothes. After reaching the road and getting into the car, he drove at a high speed, arriving at the restaurant in 10 minutes. Master, here I am. Zhao Feng rushed into the restaurant and sat down opposite Zhang Han. Good. Zhang Han directly said, go to Shangjing and bring Xian back. Okay, when should I go, Master? Zhao Feng asked. You can decide on your own, however. The quicker the better, and, bring her back by tomorrow night, Zhang Han replied. Okay. Zhao Feng nodded, vaguely understanding some of what was going on. At this point, he asked in an uncertain tone, Master, did your wife get in trouble? There are some flies buzzing around her, and they are keeping her from coming back to Hong Kong. Your purpose in going there is to take her back and... At this moment, Zhang Han hardened his eyes and said coldly, swat those flies. Upon hearing his words, Zhao Feng was completely shocked. Did Master want to kill them? Swat those flies. That was to say, his trip to Shangjing this time was to take Master's wife back, and he was to fight against anyone or anything that stood in the way. Fuck. The Master asked him to sweep through their territory in Shangjing. After understanding Zhang Han's true intentions, Zhao Feng put on a stiff look. Shangjing was a place with complicated forces, so how would he be able to fulfill the task by himself? However, he would never refuse his master's order. After thinking for a while, Zhao Feng slowly said, Master, shall I go there alone or with the others? Ahu and the other trainees have also broken through to the obvious strength stage. It's up to you. Zhang Han gave a bland response. He was not worried about Zhao Feng's disposition since he had worked for Tang Zan for several years. Zhang Han believed that he could handle this task properly. Even if he really were confronted with a major force, he would just call him as he had done last time. Okay, Master, I understand. I'll make the arrangements now. Zhao Feng got up and left. After getting into the car, Zhao Feng did not drive away. Instead, he called Guchen. The entire southern district had stabilized after a week. Meanwhile, Lao Biao and his men had all been expelled. Because of that, Guchen had already become the underground leader of the southern district. He, however, had to consolidate his power now. Perhaps the southern district would develop steadily again in about a month. But all this had nothing to do with Zhao Feng. After the call was put through, Zhao Feng immediately said, Guchen, have you prepared all the things I asked for before? Yes. Please ask someone to send them to the Fengming nightclub. I'll go there later, Zhao Feng said. Okay, I'll go there myself later. Let's have a drink tonight, Guchen said with a smile. After thinking for a while, Zhao Feng said, you can ask someone to send them. I'll be going out. By the way, if it's convenient, please help me book some tickets for a flight around 3:00 a.m. to 5:00 a.m. to Shangjing. Everything happened so abruptly that Zhao Feng had no time to make arrangements. Guchen was more well connected, so he needed his help. How many tickets do you want? Guchen asked. 30. I'll send you all the information on the people going later, Zhao Feng said slowly as his eyes narrowed. Okay. That will be all for now. After he finished speaking, Zhao Feng hung up. He started the car and drove back to the beach. Everybody take a break for a few minutes. Zhao Feng clapped his hands and called them closer. What is it, Brother Feng? All those who were promoted to the obvious strength stage, except for Xuyong, follow me. Zhao Feng thought for a moment and said, Xuyong, you should stay here and continue with the training here. Brother Feng, what are we going to do? Ahu's eyes lit up. Under everyone's curious gaze, Zhao Feng firmly spat out a few words. We're going to Shangjing to teach someone a lesson. Ha, 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 we're going to take action, let's go. After a pause, Elder Meng burst out laughing. Brother Feng, why aren't you taking me since you're going to abuse someone? Xuyong said while giving him a wry smile. You're the best of the current trainees, so you should stay here, Zhao Feng said with a chuckle. Fuck, okay. Xuyong shook his head helplessly. Ahu and other 28 people followed Zhao Feng and left, filled with excitement. They wanted to show off their dramatically growing strength. Just thinking about it seemed exciting. However, those who were not going to Shangjing felt wronged, on account of their insufficient strength. They could not go with them this time, but they would make sure they were not left behind next time. Zhao Feng took the lead and drove to the Fengming nightclub. At this point, they were regarded as guests, which made them emotional. They were taken to the guest room, and the uniforms Zhao Feng had reserved before were waiting inside. Zhao Feng asked one of his men to send the information for everyone who was going to Guchen. Then Guchen booked the tickets for the flight at 3 o'clock in the morning. Find the clothes marked with your names and change into them. Zhao Feng waved his hand as he shouted. The designs on the clothes were tailor-made, and everyone had 3 suits. Zhao Feng spent a lot on the uniforms because he believed they represented Meng security and Zhang Han when they were out. Therefore, Zhao Feng spent nearly 16 million yuan in order to make the uniforms stand out. The suits were tailored by Bryony, and each of them cost a little over 100,000 yuan. Moreover, the shirts, ties, and leather shoes were all made by Dior, which cost nearly 50,000 yuan in total. There was no denying that only successful people deserved to wear such uniforms. Everyone quickly changed their clothes and came out. When they learned how expensive a single uniform was, they were all excited. They had never worn such high-quality uniforms even after being in associations for several years. Brother Feng, when should we head out? What are we going to do in Shangjing? Ahu asked excitedly. We will set off at 3:00 in the morning, and we are going there to pick up Master's wife. Some people don't want to let her come back, so whoever blocks us this time, we'll just beat them. Zhao Feng replied in a deep voice. Hu and his companions all became impatient because of these words, so they wanted to arrive in Shangjing as early as possible and change the current situation there. As for Zhao Feng, he became silent. Shangjing was actually an extremely dangerous place. Zhao Feng was a person who liked to look before he leapt, so he would not be affected by his growing strength and become arrogant. After they noticed that Zhao Feng was busy thinking, everyone gradually quieted down. Hu, contact a team which will serve us all day tomorrow in Shangjing, Zhao Feng said all of a sudden. Okay. Hu took out his mobile phone and began to make some calls without hesitation. Elder Meng, book 32 tickets for a flight at about 11 o'clock in the morning from Shangjing to Hong Kong. I'll send you the other 2 ID numbers, Zhao Feng said. Okay. Elder Meng nodded. I'm going to make a call. After a pause, Zhao Feng walked into a bedroom, stood by the window and dialed a number. Instructor Liu, there's something I need to trouble you with. At 7 o'clock the next morning. Knock, knock, knock. Fu Shan rudely knocked on the door of Xian and Zif's room. What's wrong with you? After opening the door, Zif asked grumpily. Tidy up, we're going out in half an hour to talk over the contract at the Feng Tai Club, Fu Shan said coldly. I see. Zif responded and closed the door. At this moment, Xian and Zif had just woken up. After getting dressed, they were taken away by Fu Shan without even having breakfast. The Feng Tai Club was a private entertainment club, which adopted a membership system and was not accessible to the public. The concept of a private entertainment club came from the rich in Europe. It was created for the rich, and its annual membership fee was tens of millions of dollars per person. The membership to a private club was a symbol of wealth and status. The Feng Tai Club was a well-known private club in Shangjing, which was supported by the Zhangs, a wealthy family in Shangjing. The owner of the club was Zhang Long, who was the son of the master of the Zhang family. The Zhang family had suffered a decline during the year after Zhang Han's father, Zhang Yu, had disappeared, but, under the leadership of Zhang Nan, it gradually developed smoothly. Despite not being as powerful as before, it was still a big family. As for Zhang Long, the most outstanding son of the Zhang family in recent years, he was expected to rise to the core of the Zhang family in a few years. While riding in a JMC limo, Fu Shan entered through the main entrance of the club with Xian, Zif, and 2 other men. The club was a leisure and entertainment building, with many villa-style buildings, hot springs, small bridges, flowing streams, and rock gardens inside. It was a good place for relaxation. Following a waiter, they stepped inside, walked through the leisure building, and got into a car for sightseeing. They drove all the way to the right, to a wide lawn which was used as the club's golf course. Since the sun was not too warm at 8 o'clock in the morning, people would not feel hot when they played golf this early in Shangjing. After walking onto the golf course, they saw about a dozen people, including Lin Ji, standing on one side of the tee, while Wai Zhao and some others were standing behind them. It was almost as if they didn't exist. Child Lin, here we are. Fu Shan approached Lin Ji, bowed, and said with a smile, "Mm." Lin Ji nodded flatly, then looked at Xian, smiled slightly, and said, I see. Xian, do you want to have a try? I don't know how to play. Xian shook her head slightly. Meanwhile, she felt a little unhappy and helpless. Fu Shan said they were here to talk about the contract, but it seemed like he forced her here to accompany them and play golf. That's odd. I seem to remember that Miss Zi plays golf quite well. The tall man beside Lin Ji said with a chuckle all of a sudden. Xian looked over at him. Let me introduce you, this is Zhang Long, child Zhang, who is an outstanding person in the younger generation of the Zhang family. Lin Ji said with a smile. Oh. Xian was expressionless. She nodded her head gently and said, Child Zhang. Xian, do you remember me? At this point, the man with cropped hair at Zhang Long's left curled his lip and spoke up. He sized up Xian with a playful gaze. "Excuse me, who are you?" Xian asked in doubt. "My name is Zhang Yuan. Do you remember that time you passed out while drinking?" Zhang Yuan said lazily. "I don't remember." Xian gave a bland response, but she thought of what had happened at the beginning. She had not drank much, but she had been drugged, which caused the accident that happened between her and Zhang Han. Beauties of short memories, ha, ha. Zhang Yuan hissed with a hint of a taunt. Seeing that Zhang Yuan was somewhat arrogant, Zhang Long secretly shook his head. How could the person who used his family's strong background to do unscrupulous things ever be successful? Zhang Long, however, was delighted. Only when the others were weak could he stand out and become the next head of the Zhang family. "Xian, do you want to play around?" Linji asked again. "No." In the face of Xian's refusal, Linji said no more. He looked at Zhang Long, smiled, and said, "Brother Long, how about playing another round?" "Great, I'll be serious this time," Zhang Long smiled and said. "I'm waiting to see." The two men started a new round of golf, which ended with Zhang Long's narrow success. "Brother Long, what do you think of the thing I mentioned to you the other day?" After the game, Linji suddenly asked him a question. The main purpose of his trip this time was to talk about cooperating with Zhang Long. As for Xian, she was only brought by Fu Shan as his companion to show his kindness to Zhang Long. However, it seemed that she did not understand her position. "Let's go to my office and talk about it. I just got a batch of antiques that child Lin might appreciate." Zhang Long smiled and said, "Okay." Lin Ji nodded. The two men took the lead and walked forward, followed by Zhang Yuan and the other four people, while everyone else remained where they were. It was obvious that they were not qualified to join them. After taking 2 steps, Fu Shan looked towards Xian, gave her a glance, and said, "Xian, don't just stand there, follow us." Xian felt angry upon seeing the look in his eyes. She did not move but said coldly, "Director Fu, Director Y is over there. Can we talk about the contract first? I have something to do." As soon as Xian opened her mouth, Zhang Long, Linji, and the others stopped, then looked at her. Fu Shan's face was as hard as stone. He glared at Xian and said with a greasy smile, "Xian, we'll talk about the contract later. Director Fu, you can go first, and we can talk with Director Y ourselves," Zif said as she casually walked towards Xian. She showed no fear because she had just been told that the men brother-in-law sent were coming. "Xian, did you already forget what I told you yesterday?" Fu Shan was so irate, but he had to hold back his anger in such a situation and speak in a low voice. "What, do you disdain us?" Zhang Yuan frowned, then looked at Xian and said, "You don't even understand the rules." As soon as he spoke, the atmosphere on the court cooled down a little. Ahem. At this moment, Linji smiled and said, "Xian hasn't been feeling well these past few days, so let her have a rest. We can go over to discuss things." "Okay." Zhang Long shook his head with a smile and then stepped forward. They left, while Fu Shan stayed with a livid face. He stared at Xian and Zuf, wanting to say something but withholding himself from speaking. If no one was here, he was likely to swear. "Oh, Director Fu, your eyes are a little red. Did you stay up late? Can we talk about that contract? Why don't we talk over it another day?" Zif put on a concerned look. "We can talk now." Fu Shan secretly gritted his teeth as he took the lead and walked towards the rest area. After greeting Wai Zhao and his companions, Zif and Xian sat down and started talking over the contract with them. Under the repeated urging of Zif, Wai Zhao took out a contract. Zif looked through it for about 10 minutes. After she finished reading, her face fell. "Both the role and the part of Xian are uncertain, so why do you ask us to identify the role? Are you kidding?" Zif sneered, throwing the contract back. At this point, Xian also frowned. She looked at Fu Shan and Wai Zhao with indifference, then said, "I don't care what you have. In short, I will leave today. If you really want to cooperate with me, please contact Director Maki, Mr. Y. That's enough." Fu Shan could not contain his anger as he harshly said, "Don't you remember what I said last night? Who do you think you are, huh? Don't you have?" However, before he had finished speaking, he saw from the corner of his eye that everyone around him was dumbfounded and that they were looking at the gate. He stopped talking and his eyes widened when he looked over. A group of 30 people dressed in black suits were running over. Their vigorous pace and amazing speed scared many of the people here. It was like a scene from a movie where the tycoon of an underground force brought his men to sweep everything away. Back to 5 minutes ago. In front of the entrance of the Feng Tai Club stood a total of 8 security personnel, several of whom were chatting. "Xiaoliang, I brought those people in just now, and I saw Xian. She's beautiful, she's so beautiful. No matter how beautiful she is, only people like Jiang Long and Linji such a stunner. Hey, a group of people is coming this way." All of a sudden, a person behind them reminded them, and when they looked over, they saw 12 cars coming towards the club at a high speed. There was a line of BMW 730s with a white Bentley very conspicuously placed in the middle. Bang, bang, bang. The sound of a sequence of opening and closing doors was heard as dozens of people exited the cars. They were led by a very handsome man as they walked over with vigorous strides. "Who's this tycoon? He doesn't look familiar." One of them, a man in his 30s, greeted him and asked with a smile, "Hello, please show me your membership card." Zhao Feng glanced at him and said faintly, "I don't have a membership card." "You don't have a membership card?" The man was stunned and said, "I'm sorry, this place is not open to non-members. If you are looking for someone, please contact the people inside. I'm here to pick someone up." Zhao Feng replied, then stepped straight into the club. What are you doing? If you want to pick somebody up, please call them. Stop. If you walk any further, we'll take you out." Although there were 30 people opposite them, these 8 guards were not afraid. Not just anyone could make trouble here since they were in Shangjing and this was Jiang Long's territory. While speaking, their hands reached for the electric buttons at their lower back, and the middle-aged man asked in a colder tone, "Stop at once. Don't you know who this place belongs to? Have you already lived long enough? Do you dare to make trouble here?" Zhao Feng stopped. Before he started to speak, Ahu, Elder Meng, and several other people behind rushed forward. Bang, bang. With a few cuffs and kicks, the 8 men all lay on the ground with their hands covering their arms or bellies. "Do you think I care who this place belongs to?" Zhao Feng glanced at the middle-aged man flatly and led the way into the building. After seeing what happened, the middle-aged man and the other 7 people all gasped in surprise. The man took out the intercom and said in horror, "Something terrible has happened. Some people have come to cause trouble and they have already broken in." Zhao Feng and other 29 people marched through the building. In the lobby on the first floor, the looks on the faces of everyone all changed because they felt these people released a menacing aura. However, the staff did not dare to come forward and question them. Several security guards also heard the words from their intercoms, but they had to wait for the main force since they were not strong enough to compete with them. After exiting the entertainment building, Zhao Feng took out his mobile phone to take a look, then looked at the golf course on the right, not far from him, and said, "Get over there quickly." The instant Zhao Feng finished speaking, he started running, followed by Ahu and the others. Although they did not use all their strength, they moved as if they were competing in a 100-meter race. After witnessing what just happened, everyone in the hall was dumbfounded. Is something terrible about to happen? Let's go and have a look. Oh, my God, this is the first time a situation like this has occurred in the Feng Tai Club. Everyone followed them and rushed towards the golf course out of curiosity. However, the security personnel here were even faster than they were. In just 1 minute, they gathered nearly 50 people, all of whom were husky-looking and dressed in black waistcoats. These people quickly followed Zhao Feng and his companions. At this point, Fu Shan was about to lose his temper. Before he finished speaking, he saw Zhao Feng and his companions running over. More than a dozen people present were all shocked as they stood up in puzzlement. Who were they? What were they doing here? Xian, however, calmed down after catching sight of Zhao Feng. She did not know why he had come here. However, Zif knew their purpose, and she was a little excited. Ha! What a large number of people. Brother-in-law is so awesome. She ran towards them, but Zhao Feng and the others did not even take a breath. They stood in front of Xian while being unsure how to address her. Masters. Ah. He did not say master's wife out loud. Boss. Ahem. It was a little incorrect to call her the boss's wife. So how should he address her? Zhao Feng's mouth slightly quivered. He thought that his hesitation had somewhat influenced their momentum. Sister Xian, the boss asked us to pick you up. After thinking for a while, Zhao Feng smiled and said this. At this moment, not only his smile, but also what he said, made Xian feel warm. He sent his men to pick me up. It's good to be taken care of. Okay. Xian smiled and nodded her head gently. Upon seeing Xian's smile, Zhao Feng grinned as well. At this point, a discordant voice rang out. You want to go? Ha, ha, where are you going to go? After Fu Shan returned to his senses, he scoffed. This nobody dared to come to Jiang Long's club to take Xian away? They must be tired of living. With a voice dripping with sarcasm, he said. Xian, if you leave here, I'll not only sue you, but also request the company to suppress you. Do you want to see your future career? Before he finished speaking, Zhao Feng suddenly stopped smiling. He looked at Fu Shan coldly and said, Who are you? He's Fu Shan, Director Fu of our Royal Entertainment Company. The staff beside Fu Shan sneered and said, You shouldn't rely on the number of your men. Xian is an entertainer of our company and has to obey the management. Oh. Zhao Feng acted as if he took a tumble. He reached out his right hand and waved it, then spat out 2 words, Ahu. Whoosh. Ahu moved and rushed to Fu Shan at a high speed. Under his horrified gaze, Ahu raised his hand. Chapter 236. Sweep through everything. Ahu hit Fu Shan on the left side of his face, and the slap was so hard that it almost spun Fu Shan around. However, as soon as he moved, Zhao Hu grabbed him by the collar and looked at him coldly. Ahu's move stunned all the people present, and even those who lived in Shangjing, like Hua Zhao, felt weird. He dared to hit him. They really came here to cause trouble. Zif, however, after witnessing what happened, clenched his fist tightly and almost made a gesture of congratulation and victory. She was in a good mood. You deserve it. You deserve to be beaten for the things you've said to us. Zif growled inwardly. Xian, similarly, felt much better when she saw Fu Shan being hit. As for Fu Shan, he was totally stunned. He glared at Ahu and said angrily, You. Pa. What are you saying? Ahu raised his left hand and slapped Fu Shan on the right cheek. Pa. You? No. Pa. No? After a series of slaps, Fu Shan completely became confused. However, he knew that if he spoke, he would get hit. Although he had shut up, Ahu did not stop slapping him. Pa. Who are you? Ahu raised his eyebrows. Pa. I'm asking you a question. Pa. Stop slapping me. Fu Shan was about to say something. Pa. I'm asking who you are. I didn't hear you clearly just now. Ahu said coldly. I am. Pa. Fu Shan. I am Fu Shan. I'm Fu Shan. Fu Shan eventually shouted. At this point, his cheeks had swollen up and his chubby face was like a pig's. You should have told me earlier. Ahu sighed softly, then loosened his grip on the man's collar and clapped his hands several times. Fu Shan let out a sigh of relief inwardly, but the next words from this man seemed to throw him into freezing pool of water. So you're Fu Shan? Ha, you're the one I need to beat. Ahu put on a playful smile and struck Fu Shan down with his hands and feet. Stop beating him. At this moment, Zif, who was euphoric, ran over with distress on her face. She crossly glanced at Ahu and gently pushed him. Then she crouched down, stretched out her hand to pinch Fu Shan's face. She said painfully while pinching, "Why did you take a beating over something that could have been discussed? Ah, you look like a pig now. Director Fu, are you in pain? Let me rub your face." "Ah, oh," hiss. "Stops doing that." He just felt numb before Zif rubbed his face, but now he could not help shivering with pain. Okay, I'll stop immediately." After she finished speaking, Zif pinched his face twice, and then she stood up, glanced at the two men who followed Fu Shan, and hastily said, "You are Director Fu's cronies. Why don't you take Director Fu to get some rest? Why do you standing there so limply? I remember you were arrogant when you were talking to us yesterday." "What?" The two men froze with tearless grief. They knew that Zif was reminding these guys of the fact that they ranted and raved against Xian. After she finished speaking, Zif looked at Ahu with a flicker in her eyes as she said in a reproachful tone, "Oh, what's wrong with you? Why did you beat him?" "Oh, I'll be gentle this time," Ahu responded. After glancing at the two men, he moved. After a series of cracking sounds, the two men fell to the ground and groaned. Hum. After seeing the pitiful sight, Zif turned around and returned to Xian with contentment. "You're so naughty." Xian rolled her eyes at her, but there was no blame in her eyes. At this point, there were more than a dozen others present, standing on the other side while holding their breath. "Who's Waijiao?" All of a sudden, Zhao Feng glanced around the crowd coldly. Everyone who received this frigid glance felt as if they had fallen into an ice cave. Seeing their reaction, Zhao Feng secretly shook his head. It was like the old saying, "The weak are afraid to speak up in the face of the strong." At this time, no one dared to speak, because the momentum of the men in front of them was too strong. Furthermore, they thought they must be more powerful than Jiang Long and Lin Ji. "Who's Waijiao? If no one admits it, we'll beat you all." Elder Meng took a step forward and hooted angrily. The instant he finished his words, over a dozen people on the right shivered, and the people beside Waijiao hurried back several meters. Waijiao quivered, then said with a woeful look, I am Waijiao, but this matter has nothing to do with me." "Nothing to do with you?" Elder Meng sneered and stepped towards him. It was this move that frightened Waijiao and caused him to fall on the ground. He realized his body was too limp to stand up. Everyone else also had their hearts in their throats. Where did these devils come from? They were not here to pick someone up, they came to abuse them. Fortunately, Elder Meng did not take action. He was over 1.8 meters high, and he was currently looking down at Waijiao. At this moment, he narrowed his eyes and said, "Aren't you going to sign the contract? Where's the contract?" "Here it is." Waijiao shook as he took out the contract honestly and handed it over. Ha. Elder Meng chuckled and glanced at Zif with the contract in his hands, then said, "What do you think about this contract? Are there any problems with it? Are you going to sign it?" Damn. After hearing what Elder Meng said, Waijiao's heart gradually sank. "I won't sign it." Zif said in a huff, "It's move like a slave contract. They are using this contract to stop Elder Sister Yan from going back." "Oh." Elder Meng took the contract and looked at Waijiao with a cold stare. Every time he finished a sentence, he hit Waijiao in the head with the contract. "Director Y, right? Bang. A slave contract. Bang. You're so awesome. Waijiao was hit 7 or 8 times. Although he did not feel pain, he was scared to death because of Elder Meng's momentum. "Since you like this kind of contract, you can eat it," Elder Meng said at last. He did not move, but handed over the contract. "What?" Waijiao glanced at him in confusion. "Eat this contract. I'll count to 3. 1, 2. Elder Meng's face clouded over. Before he made it to 3, Waijiao grabbed the contract and stuffs it into his mouth as if he was eating a roast duck and trying to swallow it. While he was chewing it, he whined inwardly. "This is a group of demons. Did I do something wrong? It isn't my fault at all." Waijiao felt a little wronged since the impact of the contract had landed on him. Fortunately, more than 50 security personnel rushed into the golf course from the entrance right after he had taken 2 bites. His eyes lit up and he stopped chewing. Reinforcements were here. Wang Zhao spat the ball of paper out of his mouth on the grass nearby. Elder Meng glanced at him and ignored him temporarily. At this point, there was a sense of help in Wang Zhao's mind. Although you were just formidable, you won't be able to act so high and might once the security guards arrive. Wang Zhao thought. Who are you? Among the security group containing more than 50 people, a man with a cold face walked out and asked in a questioning tone. We come here to pick someone up. Zhao Feng gave a bland response. Ha, ha, pick someone up? Don't you know the consequences for causing trouble here? The man laughed scornfully and said, Now, I'll give you a choice. Squat down with your hands on your backs, or, oh. Zhao Feng nodded his head, raised his right hand and waved it gently, then he said, Go ahead, tell him what we are doing here. Whoosh. As soon as he finished speaking, Ahu, Elder Meng, and everyone behind him moved and rushed towards the 50 or so people. The man, who had spoken before, put on a rigid expression. He had not expected these people to do whatever they wanted. Don't they know where they are? The man felt a little confused. However, Zhao Feng had already answered this question once when he was at the front gate, so he would not answer it again. What had happened completely shocked Wang Zhao and the others. They did not think these people would dare to cause trouble in Jiang Long's club. Even Xian was in a trance. Zhao Feng, who had been gentle and acted as a waiter in the restaurant, became like a new man who was filled with great vigor. However, she did not know that the Zhao Feng, who failed to show restraint now, was the real him. In fact, he was even more direct than before at this point. It was all because of Zhang Han, who gave him confidence and helped him improve his strength. However, Xian had a few questions in her mind. Who exactly is Zhao Feng? He was hired by Zhang Han, so what's the relationship between Zhao Feng and Zhang Han? At this point, Xian inexplicably realized that Zhang Han was mysterious. He was not the sore loser from 5 years ago. Did Meng change him? At this moment, Xian was absent-minded. More than 20 guests at the entrance followed behind the security guards, widening their eyes as they started calling out. Damn it, is this for real? They're going to fight with each other. It's not a wise choice to cause trouble at Brother Long's place. I fear that these people will find it difficult to get out of this club today. Not necessarily. Don't you see their suits? Honestly speaking, each one of them is tailor-made by Bryony and cost over 100,000 yuan. Moreover, their shirts, ties, and leather shoes were all made by Versace or Dior, with every 3-piece set costing 40,000 to 50,000 yuan. Judging by their stance, they're similar to bodyguards. They definitely aren't average people since they can all wear matching uniforms that cost 160,000 to 170,000 yuan. That seems to make sense. Hiss. What? My God, how is that possible? During their discussion, the two sides rushed towards each other. They had imagined that it would be a melee, but in an instant, those 50 or so people all lay on the ground, groaning, and no one could stand. My gosh, they're so formidable. It's too scary. Oh, my God, even though all the guards in the club are good at fighting, were they all defeated in a single move? Everyone was in shock. Not only had these people, Xian and Zuf also gradually widened their eyes. As for Xian, she looked so cute with such an adorable expression. As for Zuf, she mumbled excitedly. Oh, my God, it's so amazing. How awesome. When Zif saw all of them walk back with a calm face after beating the opposite side, she thought they were so cool. However, Wang Zhao and the people at the backside became dumbfounded again. Eat it up, don't you understand? Elder Meng came over with a sneer on his face. Ah! Wang Zhao shook in fright and quickly said, Okay. After he finished these words, he was going to continue chewing the contract in his hand. However, Elder Meng pointed at the wad of paper that had been spit out by Wai Jiao. "Eat this first." "Fine." Wai Jiao wanted to cry, but he still picked up the wad of paper and stuffed it into his mouth so he could continue eating it. Chapter 237, Too Weak. Meanwhile, Zhang Long, Lin Ji, Zhang Yuan, and a few of their men were busy appreciating the antiques in Zhang Long's office. Antiques were one of the hot topics in their circle. Although they lacked professional knowledge, they were discerning enough to appreciate them since they had been handling them for a long time. While they were sizing up a porcelain vase, a one-eyed man rushed into the office all of a sudden. "Brother Long." The man glanced at Lin Ji and seemed to be somewhat hesitant. "What's wrong?" Zhang Long gave him a queer look. The man named Dong Lang was a martial artist who was at the late stage in obvious strength and would reach the inward strength stage soon. He was responsible for the management of club as a groundskeeper and took charge of a nightclub. In general, when Zhang Long came, he would not take the initiative to come over to speak out unless Zhang Long called for him. But Dong Lang actually came in person. In Zhang Long's view, he probably wanted to ask him some important questions. However, his face fell on account of Dong Lang's words. He slowly said, 30 people are causing trouble on the golf course. Each one of them is very skillful and dressed in a uniform that costs more than 150,000 yuan. They came in from the main entrance and have knocked down over 50 security guards on the golf course." "What?" Zhang Long frowned and asked, "Where did they come from?" At this point, all of their faces also changed, and Lin Ji put on a strange and playful look. He had not expected that he would get to see a fight today. "I don't know who they are and I'm not familiar with them, however, they..." At this moment, Dong Lang glanced at Lin Ji and said, "They came here for a lady called Xian." Li Ji was stunned, but his eyes began to shine. "For Xian?" Zhang Long's expression softened, then he gave Lin Ji a queer look and said, "It seems that Xian's escorts have arrived." "What the fuck?" Zhang Yuan stood on the side and laughed, then swore, "How dare they cause trouble here, they're so bold." Zhang Yuan's behavior made Zhang Long frown. His cousin seemed to become more and more arrogant. "Let's go have a look." Lin Ji directly ignored Zhang Yuan, then looked at Zhang Long and said, "Let's go and see for ourselves where these bold people came from." Zhang Long smiled and said while taking the lead in walking out, "It's difficult to be escorts, child Lin, don't worry. Since they've stepped into my territory, I won't stand idly by. I'll have to thank Brother Long for his kindness," Lin Ji replied with a chuckle. If they were Xian's escorts, Lin Ji should be the first to take the blame. However, he could not keep out of it since they were causing trouble in his club. All Lin Ji wanted was to ask him to stand with him. Only in this way could they defeat the unknown enemies. Moreover, Lin Ji was unable to refuse. When they walked out of the office, Lin Ji dialed their number and simply said, "Nantan, take your men and wait for me at the entrance of the golf course." On the golf course, Wai Jiao had already eaten the contract, which was hard to swallow, but when he glanced at the people in front of him and saw their indifferent demeanor, Wai Jiao could not help shaking. He had to swallow it. However, he realized that he was not in danger while he was busy eating it, so his thoughts drifted. These people are really awesome. If only this could be made into a movie, it would be a big hit at the box office. Where did these malicious men come from? Fortunately, I did not offend Xian, otherwise, I would be facing a dreadful situation today. It seems that Xian is not an ordinary person since she is being protected by this group of people. Alas, she's unusual. While reflecting on everything, Wai Jiao ate the whole contract. Before he returned back to his senses, he subconsciously looked at Elder Meng and said, "I finished." Elder Meng was somewhat shocked. "What are you doing? You could have just stayed there after eating the contract, so why did you come over and inform me? Are there any other contracts? Take them out and let me have a look." Elder Meng's eyes narrowed as he looked at Wai Jiao and spoke. Hiss. Wai Jiao suddenly returned to his senses. He shivered and repeatedly said, "No. No, no, There's definitely no other contracts. Besides, Mrs.'s contract wasn't made by me. It really has nothing to do with me. These men in front of him were all thugs that could strike down 50 or so people with only one move. How dare he provoke them? All right, get away from me. Elder Meng was tired of talking nonsense with him and waved in disgust. Wei Zhao was relieved and repeatedly whispered, "Thank you, thank you." While speaking, he quickly stepped back. After looking around, Zhao Feng walked over to Xian with a smile and whispered, "Boss's wife, are there any other flies? My boss said that these flies should be swatted. Whoever dares to bully you, we'll beat them." His voice was so low that Zhao Feng, who had just seemed cool, looked somewhat funny now. Ha, ha. Xian burst into a rare bout of laughter. There was a happy and interesting look in her eyes, and it was all because of Zhao Feng's words, and Zhang Han's attitude, which was revealed by Zhao Feng's words. Beat the people who bully me? Why is he so bossy? However, at this moment, Xian felt sweet, and the suppressed anger caused by the unfair treatment these past few days also dissipated. Xian smiled, curved her lips, then shook her head slightly and said, "There's no need to beat them, let's go." "Is this all?" Zif grinned. "What more do you want?" Xian gave Zif an angry stare. Let's go back to Hong Kong." Zif smiled widely and headed for the entrance. Zhao Feng walked along at Xian's side, while Lahu and others followed beside or behind her with great vigor. The picture looked extremely cool when compared to the more than 50 people who were lying on the ground. In the meantime, dozens of people who were standing beside the entrance sighed repeatedly. It seems like they aren't normal, they're so awesome. It's the first time that people have caused so much trouble in the Feng Tai Club. I didn't imagine that they would be able to leave safely. Who said they couldn't leave? A voice suddenly came from the crowd. Look, Zhang Long and Lin Ji are coming. It will definitely be impossible for these people to leave. They're coming. The best part is about to begin. When everyone saw more than 30 people walking towards the entrance of the golf course, their hearts beat loudly and they quickly moved to one side. They expected the entrance to turn into the second battlefield today. Judging by their disposition, they probably wouldn't concede. If they did not concede, the two sides would fight with each other again. But, would they be able to win with so little effort this time? Perhaps these people will have a tough time. Who can stop Dong Lang, Nantan, and their men? A middle-aged man in the crowd sneered. This man said what was on many people's mind. Although they had trembled in fear because of Zhao Feng and his companions just now, once they returned to their senses they realized that things were about to get worse. Those who dared to cause trouble in the Feng Tai Club were bound to face Zhang Long's anger, and the Zhang family stood behind him. Few people could contend against the Zhang family in Shangjing. Zhao Feng and his men took a few steps forward. Right after they finished passing the people who were lying on the ground, they saw Zhang Long and his companions approaching. The two sides looked at each other several times as they walked towards each other. When they were only slightly more than 10 meters away, they stopped in succession and looked at each other without saying anything. At that moment, Zif put on a worried look. Despite enjoying themselves just now, this matter would not necessarily be easy to end since the people at the top had arrived. As for Zhang Long and Lin Ji, they were still calm, and Zhang Long didn't even intend to speak. At this point, Lin Ji felt a little helpless, but he had to take the lead as this had something to do with him. So, Lin Ji took a step forward, looked at Xian, then smiled and said, "Miss Zi, aren't you satisfied with my arrangements? I don't think I've treated you badly so far." Xian shook her head slightly. When she was about to speak, Zhao Feng chuckled and said, "You know what you're thinking, so stop talking nonsense." As soon as he finished speaking, Lin Ji widened his eyes. At this point, he would feel humiliated if he let them leave. Not to mention that he had not intended to let them go at the beginning. Only he who could decide whether to send them away if they had some background. Lin Ji, therefore, slowly said, "Then I won't talk nonsense with you. Miss Zi can leave, but not now. I won't let you take her away." I will discuss the matter regarding when she can go back with her superiors at the Royal Entertainment Company." After saying this, Lin Ji waved to the people behind him and said, "Nantan, take Miss Zi to the hotel to rest." "Okay." Nantan gave a bland response and took the lead as he walked towards Zhao Feng and his companions. Although they had fewer people, only 10, they were full of vigor, as if they had not cared about the large number of opponents. Ha, ha. At this moment, Zhang Long chuckled. In his view, he had completely gained the upper hand. These people would be afraid of Lin Ji if Nantan succeeded in taking Xian away. In that case, he would be able to defeat them easily. If the two sides fought with each other, Lin Ji would try his best to defeat them. At that time, he could watch from the sidelines and would have room to maneuver. However, even though what he imagined was beautiful, reality is cruel. Upon seeing Nantan and the other 9 people approaching with vigorous strides, Hu and his companions moved. But, at this moment, Zhao Feng raised his right arm and motioned for them not to take action. Then he walked forward alone. My gosh, he's going to fight alone. Hu and some others curved their lips and did not say anything. But many people's faces changed when they saw Zhao Feng move. Maybe I underestimated their courage. Zhang Long gradually became serious. As for the people watching this battle from the sidelines, they burst out into an uproar. That guy is facing them head on. Fuck, he's so awesome. His opponent is Lin Ji's ace bodyguard, Nantan. I think that man will be defeated in one move. Poof, how's that possible? Under everyone's gazes, Zhao Feng and Nantan continued drawing closer and closer. Upon seeing Zhao Feng's movement, Nantan hardened his eyes and rushed forward. As he approached Zhao Feng, he lifted his right leg and launched a full power attack straight at Zhao Feng's face. Even the trouser legs rattled on account of his high speed and great strength. Everyone clearly knew that if Zhao Feng was kicked, he would have a concussion. What was worse, he would become a vegetable. However, Lin Ji could smooth things out even if Zhao Feng became a vegetable. However, things always deviated from what was imagined. In the face of Nantan's attack, Zhao Feng sneered, then raised his right leg to meet Nantan's movement. You're courting death. When Nantan realized that he was determined to struggle, he became angry and expended all his strength. Bang! As the two legs met with each other, a rumbling sound came out. The next moment, crack! A crisp sound was heard. Under Nantan's appalling gaze, his calf was bent to the side at an angle of 90 degrees. What? Before Nantan could even feel the pain in his leg, he saw the man in front of him kick him in the abdomen. Nantan was kicked upside down and ended up laying on the ground more than 10 meters away from his original position. Too weak. Zhao Feng faintly yelled out those 2 words. The next moment, he looked at the several people who followed Nantan, then moved and rushed forward. Chapter 238, They Are Scared. Bang, bang, bang. Everyone who encountered Zhao Feng was instantly sent flying, which completely shocked everyone present. What's happening? Lin Ji's pupils suddenly contracted and he thought of a possibility that caused his heart to skip a beat. He's part of that group too. At this moment, Lin Ji's mind was absolutely muddled. Nantan, as his ace bodyguard, was powerful enough to help him become a central person in Shangjing, even though he was only at the obvious strength stage in the martial arts world. However, he had not expected that the leader of these men, who came out of nowhere, was also a martial artist, and one who could even break Nantan's leg with one move. Lin Ji was stunned by his strength. It was completely shocking. In addition to Lin Ji, Zhang Long, who stood beside him, had a dignified look. At this moment, he realized these people probably had an impressive background. After all, it was impossible for ordinary people to hire people from the martial arts world. However, he was not worried. Although Zhao Feng defeated Nantan with one move, he was fully aware of Nantan's level. He remembered that Dong Lang once said he could overcome Nantan with one move. However, he did not know one move from a certain person might not be the same as one move from another. Behind them, in the distance, Wai Zhao and the others who stood together with him all trembled with fright. "Oh, my God! Who the hell are they?" said Wei Zhao while quivering. They were so powerful that the people brought Linji and his companions were completely defeated. How horrifying! Wei Zhao felt shocked, but he also thought about how lucky he was at the same time. Fortunately, I only had to eat a contract. If I was beaten a few times, I would be seriously injured. However, it wasn't just them. Even Xian, who was standing in the middle of Ahu and his companions, had slightly opened her mouth in surprise. She also had not expected Zhao Feng to be so awesome. As for Zhao Feng, he was really unperturbed and tried to make himself look nonchalant, like his master was under other people's gazes. However, after several failures, Zhao Feng gave up. He glanced around at Linji and the others. Then, in a calm manner like his master, he said, "I'm taking them with me. Does anyone have something to say about that? You're going to take them away?" Zhang Long shook his head with a smile and said, "You're really looking down upon me if you think you can leave here unharmed after causing so much trouble. You're in Shangjing." At this point, Linji also regained his normal demeanor. He stared at Zhao Feng and slowly said, "Even if you're good at fighting, don't forget where this is. I'll give you a chance to identify yourself and tell me who sent you." At this moment, Linji's tone was filled with hidden threats. As a top-level wealthy and influential clan, the Lin family hired a large number of experts. Because of that, he could have a powerful force sent here with one call. However, in general, the younger generation had to settle their problems on their own. Anyone who contacted their family for help would lose ground in the confrontation, so they would not contact their elders unless you were forced to do so. Ha, ha. Zhao Feng sized up the two men and smiled faintly, then he became calm as an extraordinarily refined breath surrounded him and said, "It doesn't matter who I am, as for my boss, he is." At this point, Zhao Feng suddenly became solemn as confidence filled his eyes. Then he slowly said two words, "Zhang Han." Whoosh. The instant he finishing speaking, Linji, Zhang Long, and others' faces all changed. They weren't shocked, but it was unexpected. Then these people are the men of that sore loser? Linji's face became rigid. He had thought that these people were bigwigs, so he had planned to suppress them with his family's name, but he never expected them to be Zhang Han's men. These two words were like magic, causing everyone to become silent because they did not know what to say at that time. Even Zhang Long, Zhang Han, his cousin who was 2 years younger than him, had not entered his mind for a long time. However, whenever he thought of Zhang Han, Zhang Long felt delighted. In those days, Zhang Han's father had surpassed his father in their family for several years. Both groups had sinister intentions and competed with each other, so he was really happy when Zhang Han was expelled from the family and went missing. However, there was someone who couldn't help shouting out, even though everyone else was silent. "What the fuck?" With a sneer, Zhang Yuan walked out from behind Zhang Long and moved towards Zhao Feng. As he walked forward, he swore, "I thought you had someone really powerful behind you, but you're actually a bunch of stupid fucks who follow Zhang Han. Did he send you here since he, the one who was expelled from the family, did not dare to come? You're a gang of idiots. You are just." When Zhang Yuan began to speak, Zhao Feng looked at him, but his mind became blank the moment he heard Zhang Yuan verbally abusing Zhang Han. He did not know what he was thinking, but he could feel a great wrath rising up in his heart. The anger increasingly heated and burned all his thoughts. At this moment, only one thought flashed through his mind. Beat him. Before Zhang Yuan could even finish his verbal assault, Zhao Feng's nose flared up and a rare look of ferociousness spread across his face. Then he stepped forward and rushed towards Zhang Yuan, who was only a few meters away from him. As for Dong Lang, who was standing behind Zhang Yuan, he tightened all his muscles when he saw Zhang Yuan step forward, and as soon as Zhao Feng moved, he immediately stepped forward to fight back. The moment before Zhao Feng reached Zhang Yuan, Dong Lang appeared in front and instantly launched a punch towards him. Zhao Feng also threw out his right fist to meet Dong Lang's punch. Bang! With a thud, the two fists met each other. Dong Lang had thought that he would have a slight edge over him or be at the same level of strength, but his whole arm was numb after one move. Moreover, Zhang Han punched towards him again before he could react, so he panicked and raised his arms to resist, which caused his left arm in front to bear the full weight of the attack. Bang! After this punch, Dong Lang was completely confused. His numb feeling in his left arm reminded him that his arm would have been broken if the opponent had exerted a little more strength. What's with this power? Dong Lang looked at Zhao Feng with horror. In fact, he was at the inward strength stage. However, since he was easily knocked back, that meant, not good. He's an inward strength martial artist. Dong Lang's heart skipped a beat as a trace of fear flashed across his face. He was already stuck between a rock and a hard place, and then he noticed Zhao Feng launching a powerful kick towards him. At this moment, Dong Lang realized he could no longer resist. Fortunately, 5 of his men with obvious strength, who were behind him, helped him take the attack. They attacked Zhao Feng with their fists and legs, which forced Zhao Feng to withdraw his right leg and take a step back to maintain his balance. At this moment, Zhang Yuan finally reacted. He was frightened at first, but he became really angry at the same time. What the fuck? Kill him! Zhang Yuan yelled out as he stepped backwards. Kill him? Dong Lang gave a wry smile inwardly. Even if they worked together to fight against him, they could not defeat the inward strength martial artist in front of them. The only way was to wait for reinforcements. However, would this inward strength martial artist, who already seemed angry, give them time to wait? Under everyone's gaze, Zhao Feng clenched his right hand into a fist, then coldly said, "Break their legs." Whoosh! Ahu and his companions were waiting for his order. The instant Zhao Feng finished speaking, the 29 people behind him all rushed forward. He never does anything useful, but he always manages to cause more trouble. Lin Ji secretly glared at Zhang Yuan as he quickly stepped back. Idiot! Zhang Long directly scolded him in his mind, and then withdrew with several other members. Originally, the situation was very complicated. Zhang Long knew that someone protected these people since they dared to make trouble here, so when Nantan had been struck down, Zhang Long had already motioned his men to call Captain Liao and have the police take these people away. After that, the only thing they could do was to declare their background. If they were just a group of thugs who aimed to take Xian and Zif away, they would pay a bitter price for coming here. However, his wish backfired on him. Zhang Yuan, this defiant and arrogant guy, messed things up. The remaining 7 or 8 people retreated while more than a dozen security personnel with higher levels of strength faced off against the incoming enemies. Under Dong Lang's bitter gaze, the opponents rushed over. Fortunately, the inward strength martial artist didn't seem to have a grudge against him, which gave him hope that he could escape unharmed. But he was wrong. As soon as the numbness in Dong Lang's arm began to subside, Ahu, who ran the fastest, landed an attack. Bang! As the sound of the impact rang out, Dong Lang froze on the spot. Obvious strength? He was stunned and his eyes widened, as looked from the corner of his eyes and gauged the strength of the others who were fighting. He got so angry that his face became pale. What the fuck? They're all obvious strength martial artists. How can I fight back against all of them? An overwhelming battle began once again. As for Zhao Feng, he certainly was not idle. He ignored everyone and stared at Zhang Yuan, who was in the middle of the chaotic battle, then walked towards him one step at a time. What are you doing? Don't come over here. Dong Lang, help me. Ah! After he called out 3 times, Zhao Feng raised his leg and kicked Zhang Yuan in the mouth. This kick caused Zhang Yuan to lose several teeth. Zhao Feng did not show mercy and directly knocked Zhang Yuan off his feet with this powerful kick. As Zhang Yuan floated in the air, Zhao Feng's right leg kicks upward. Clatter, clatter. 2 clear and crisp sounds came from Zhang Yuan's legs. His legs had obviously been broken by Zhao Feng. After his legs were broken, Zhao Feng kicked Zhang Yuan once more before he fell to the ground. When Zhang Yuan landed, he was close to Lin Ji and Zhang Long, who were originally 10 meters away. Poof! Zhang Yuan spit out a mouthful of blood, mixed with teeth. He looked at Zhao Feng in disbelief and then fainted. At this point, Hu and his companions had also defeated Dong Long and a dozen others, all of whom, without exception, had their legs broken. After finishing the battle, they calmly moved back to Xi'an without a single change in their expressions. As for Zhao Feng, he was currently standing at the center of everything, surrounded by enemies who were lying on the ground. At this point, the entire golf course was wrapped in silence. It was quiet enough to hear a pin drop. "I want to take them away now. Does anyone have something to say about that?" While glancing at the people in the surrounding area with cold eyes, Zhao Feng repeated what he had said again. Everyone involuntarily took a step back when Zhao Feng glanced at him or her, even Lin Ji and Zhang Long, because, at this moment, they were scared. Chapter 239, Unstoppable. After he finished speaking, Zhao Feng suddenly stepped towards Zhang Long, which scared several people. What was he going to do? Was he going to make sure Lin Ji and Zhang Long didn't get away without punishment too? Everyone gradually widened their eyes while feeling shocked and confused. Among the crowd, Lin Ji and Zhang Long were the most nervous. Although they had a lofty position, they were also afraid of being injured. They were really anxious inwardly, but they struggled to remain composed. As Zhao Feng got closer and closer, their heats beat more and more rapidly. However, they still managed to hold their temper. Would he really dare attack me? No. The two of them firmly believed that the opponent would not attack them easily, because that would cause the situation to escalate and become a major controversy. However, Zhang Yuan had been gravely injured by him. This reminded them that they should not be too confident. He dared to injure Zhang Yuan, the eldest legitimate son of the Zhang family, which meant they were not safe either. At this moment, the two of them did not move. What they were doing was just like gambling. Finally, under everyone's gaze, Zhao Feng arrived in front of Lin Ji. He looked at Lin Ji coldly and said, "Do you have anything to say about it?" Zhao Feng's matter-of-fact tone and attitude when questioning him made Lin Ji very angry. It was as if he was being smacked in the face publicly. His own haughtiness prevented him from answering Zhao Feng's question. He understood that he would lose if he gave Zhao Feng a response. However, under Zhao Feng's gradually cooling gaze, Lin Ji felt threatened. He knew that if he did not give an answer, Zhao Feng would attack him. Lin Ji, therefore, suppressed his anger, even though rage seethed within him, and he said in a calm tone, "I have nothing to say." Ha! Zhao Feng's eyes were filled with disdain as he chuckled. Compared with his master, this famous young master was so weak. Lin Ji almost exploded when he saw the undisguised disdain in Zhao Feng's eyes. However, he had to swallow high anger since he knew well that he was no match for him at the moment. After that, Zhao Feng looked at Zhang Long without saying anything. Zhang Long laughed with an easygoing expression on his face and said, "I certainly have nothing to say since you're one of Zhang Han's men. Sometimes conflicts arise between family members." Zhao Feng did not say anything after Zhang Long finished speaking. Instead, he turned around and went straight to Xian, who was still a little stunned at the moment. At this point, on the other side, the dozens of spectators all gasped in surprise. I didn't expect that Lin Ji and Zhang Long, the two scions, would admit to being defeated by them. This is the first time these two powerful scions have failed together. If word gets out about this affair, the upper class will probably be angry enough to explode. That's right, if they leave uninjured, the two scions will lose face. But the truth is, they're no match for them even though the two of them want to stop these people. She's like Helen of Troy, only a beauty-s like Xian could trigger such a complicated battle between the upper class. Everyone began discussing what they had seen. They had not expected to witness such an unprecedented drama today. During this period, everyone's eyes were fixed on Zhao Feng. Nobody knew what this incredible person would do next. Zhao Feng stepped towards Xian and put on an easygoing expression again. He whispered with a smile. "Boss's wife, I forgot to ask you. Did any of the people over the bully you? If so, I'll scrap them." Even though his words were mild, there was a murderous intent hidden in what he said. Even Lin Ji and Zhang Long, who were not far away, realized that the vicious man with inward strength was asking her what he should do. They knew that this reckless person was likely to take action if Xian nodded. Lin Ji felt ill as if he had eaten shit. Xian, who should have been easy to get his hands on in his view, became the person who decided their fates. This contrast was really shocking. Fortunately, for them, Xian did not nod. She shook her head slightly and said, "No, let's go back." "Fine." Zhao Feng nodded. He glanced at Ahu and his companions, and then said, "Let's go." At that point, they all went to the entrance. Xian and Zif walked at the front, with Zhao Feng, Ahu, and Elder Meng walking beside them, followed by more than 20 men dressed in black suits. Against the backdrop of those people lying on the ground, the image was extremely striking. When they passed by Zhang Long and his companions, Lin Ji suddenly opened his mouth. He smiled and said, "Miss Zi, let us walk you out." However, he did not give Xian the opportunity to reply. He, Zhang Long, and some of his men went towards the entertainment building with Xian. Captain Liao, who they had called earlier, was expected to arrive soon. Lin Ji wanted to win this time. These people defeated them by virtue of their overwhelming force, but Lin Ji still thought he could obtain a victory. As long as Xian did not leave Shangjing, the competition would continue. Xian did not say anything because she could not be bothered to talk to Lin Ji. She just walked forward. "Brother, what's your name? What's your relationship with my cousin Zhang Han? I haven't seen him for a long time and miss him." Zhang Long said with a smile, putting on a sincere look. This was the kind of person he was. He could greet others, even his enemy, with a broad smile. People normally used 3 words to describe him. A smiling tiger. His true feelings could not be determined from his facial expression. Much like Lin Ji, they were the type who hid their true intentions. However, Zhao Feng just ignored his words. Although he failed to imitate his master's apathetic gaze, indifferent tone, and immortal spirit, the thing he did not need to learn was how to ignore others. No matter what they did, he pretended as if he didn't see anything. Zhang Long laughed and shook his head. Since they were so arrogant, the only thing they could do was wait and show their hand after Captain Liao arrived. In his view, no matter who sent them here, they could not escape. With Zhang Han supporting them, that sore loser? What did he rely on? His mother's Rong clan in Lin Hai? Ha, ha, even 10 Rong clans would be of no help, not to mention one. Zhang Long sneered. After Zhao Feng said he was sent here by Zhang Han, Zhang Long guessed that these martial artists were from the Rong clan in Lin Hai City. Zhang Han's mother, the princess of the Rong clan, had been deeply affected by her family. Although the two families had negative experiences with each other after she married Zhang Yu, her family was still very concerned about Zhang Han's mother. Perhaps Zhang Han went to Lin Hai since he could not stay in Shangjing. Zhang Long laughed at him secretly. They continued marching through the entertainment building. However, something happened just as they walked out of the front door. Wee-oo, wee-oo, wee-oo. The sound of sirens blared as a dozen police cars stopped near the platform in front of them. A group of police officers got out and quickly surrounded them. Captain Liao, who walked at the front, took the initiative and greeted them solemnly. "Child Lin, Child Zhang, is what you said true?" "Yes." Lin Ji chuckled and said, "There are dozens of people lying on the golf course, many of whom are seriously injured. I think Captain Liao needs to take these people back and interrogate them since they committed such a large-scale crime." As soon as he finished speaking, a trace of anger and concern flashed across the faces of Ahu and Zuf. After hearing their remark, Captain Liao frowned. He waved his hand at his men and said, "Go assess the situation." "Yes, sir." 4 men rushed inside. after which Captain Liao's phone rang within 1 minute. After he answered the phone, his face completely fell. He looked at Zhao Feng and his men, waved his hand, and coldly said, "Take them away. Take us away?" Zhao Feng sneered, "Everyone, listen to me, fight back against anyone who dares to take action." Zhao Feng's words instantly caused the atmosphere in the surrounding area to become tense. Lin Ji, Zhang Long, and their companions were waiting to see the confrontation. At this time, they also sighed with emotion because they had not expected them to be so tenacious in the face of such a powerful force. They were indeed a group of desperate people who were not afraid of death. "They aren't so much tenacious as silly," Lin Ji sneered inwardly. After hearing what he said, Captain Liao got angry. He suddenly took out a gun from his waist and aimed the muzzle at Zhao Feng's head. However, the instant he lifted his gun, he noticed that his target had become a black certificate. Whoosh! In that instant, all eyes focused on the certificate. Although they could not see the words clearly, their hearts gradually sank when they saw the icon on it. "Open your eyes and take a hard look. I don't have time to talk nonsense. I'll give you 5 minutes, and then I'll kill whoever tries to stop us after those 5 minutes." Zhao Feng's cold voice filled the area. The unemotional words chilled everyone who was present. Captain Liao quivered, then withdrew his pistol and went forward to take a look. His eyes gradually widened and he gasped when he saw the words in front of him. "Hiss, you turned out to be," he cried out while staring at the dead center of the paper. "Wolf Head, 1st Squad, Zhang Han Special Forces, Hong Kong." In Captain Liao's view, it was a legendary special squad. He had heard a lot about it, but he never imagined that he would meet one of their members today. However, Captain Liao gave a wry smile and said, "Excuse me, Mr. Zhao, what happened here? Those people inside tried to prevent us from carrying out our mission. However, I showed mercy by only injuring them instead of flat-out killing them." Zhao Feng gave him a bland response. Yes, I see." Captain Liao nodded repeatedly. They had indeed been lenient on them since these people had tried to prevent them from carrying out their mission. He absolutely could not make a decision since Wolfhead was involved. He, therefore, glanced at Lin Ji with a wry smile and said, "I can't decide on this matter personally. I have to ask my superiors." After that, he took his cell phone and called his superior's number. "Director, I have something to tell you." Before he finished speaking, Lin Ji took 2 steps forward and interrupted him. "Let me talk to him." Captain Liao handed his phone over as Lin Ji stared coldly at Zhao Feng. Since he had already decided to offend them openly, he held the mobile phone and said, "Director Wang, I am Lin Ji. Something terrible has happened in the Feng Tai Club. I want to know if officials can get away with acting so outrageously." After telling the director what had happened, Lin Ji hung up the phone. He looked at Zhao Feng and said, "No matter who is supporting you, you won't go back unharmed after attacking my people. Whatever." Zhao Feng reached out, swatted the air while speaking in a dismissive manner. His disregard stirred Lin Ji's anger. He took out his mobile phone and dialed a number. "Uncle, I'm at the Feng Tai Club, and something has happened. The other party is from Wolfhead in Hong Kong." As soon as he spoke, Captain Liao froze in horror. "General Lin." His words shocked many people. Lin Ji spoke briefly about what had happened. After hanging up the phone, he looked at Zhao Feng with confidence. His uncle, Lin Wen, was in a position of leadership in the military region of Shangjing. He could even be called General Lin. Although he was a major general, which was the lowest rank among generals, he was only 41 years old. This really was an outstanding achievement, something the aristocratic families could be proud of. However, Zhao Feng was still calm. Zhang Long became completely silent. However, in his heart he mumbled, "It seems like Lin Ji is so angry that he is even willing to ask General Lin for help." In his opinion, once General Lin got involved, he would be able to handle everything, regardless of how strong the background of Wolfhead was. At this moment, Elder Meng, Ahu, Ziyan, and Zaf all changed their expressions. They had not expected the situation to deteriorate this much. This incident seemed to have escalated into a confrontation among the older generation. Could Zhao Feng persist through it all? In the meantime, on a distant island, Instructor Liu was lying lazily on the beach. Behind him was Wolfhead, which was ready to return. All of a sudden, his cell phone rang. He picked it up to have a look and found it was a leader in Shangjing, so he answered the phone. After listening to him for 30 seconds, he curled his lip and impatiently said, "Yes, he's one of my men. I tell you clearly that it's impossible to stop him. Dream on, child Lin, child Zhang." Bullshit. After that, he hung up the phone and immediately dialed a number which belonged to someone he hadn't contacted for a long time. "Hello, uncle, how are you? Ha, ha, I'm also going back to Hong Kong. I wanted to talk to you about a matter involving one of my men, Zhao Feng, and the owner of a certain restaurant, Mr. Zhang. Zhao Feng and his men are currently in Shangjing. Back up to the main entrance of the Feng Tai Club. 5 minutes after Lin Ji's call, Zhao Feng glanced at his watch and said, "Time's up, let's go." After he finished speaking, he prepared to leave. At this point, Lin Ji sneered and said, "Go, ha, ha, did I agree, Captain Liao?" Captain Liao gave a wry smile, then had his men move to stop Zhao Feng and said, "Sorry, you cannot leave for the time being, not until this matter had been handled properly. Please be considerate of my work. No one can stop me if I want to leave," Zhao Feng said faintly as he continued to step forward. "If you persist in doing so, I will have to take action." Captain Liao took a deep breath, reached for the pistol on his belt. He did not want to take part in these games the upper-class played, but he could not let the people in front of him go since he had not determined what had happened. Zhao Feng hardened his eyes when he saw Captain Liao reaching for his gun. When he was about to step forward, Lin Ji's cell phone rang. The sound attracted everyone's attention. They looked over, only to see Lin Ji's face gradually become pale while answering the phone. "That's impossible. How did this happen?" At this moment, Lin Ji, who had always been calm, changed color. After finishing the call, Lin Ji had a pale expression as he stood there in a daze. Then, he glanced at Zhao Feng in horror. At first, he just stood there, but he suddenly stepped towards Zhao Feng after thinking for more than 10 seconds. As he approached, he looked at Zhao Feng, bowed his head and said in a bitter tone, "I admit defeat today, you can leave." After hearing what he said, everyone, except Zhao Feng and his men, all changed their expressions. "Ha, ha." Zhao Feng responded by laughing at him, then turned to leave. Lin Ji raised his head and stared at their backs in a trance. The only thought going through his mind was, "They are unstoppable." Chapter 240, Return. Under everyone's gaze, Zhao Feng and his men went to their cars. Xian and Zuf were led by Zhao Feng to the white Bentley. Before the driver could get out and open the door, Zhao Feng opened the rear door of the car and gestured with his left hand in a very standard posture. "Boss's wife, please get in the car," Zhao Feng said with a smile. Xian glanced at him, then pursed her lips and directly sat down and shifted sideways into the car without saying anything. "You're so considerate, brother." Zif patted him on the shoulder admiringly and said, "I appreciate you." After joking with him, Zif also got in the car. Zhao Feng shook his head with a smile and sat in the passenger seat. Then the line of cars slowly drove forward. In front of the entrance of the Feng Tai Club stood a group of people. They all looked at each other in confusion. "Captain Liao, we should leave as well." After glancing at Lin Ji and Zhang Long, Captain Liao sighed gently, then waved his hand and took his men away. Lin Ji still stood there without even changing his posture. Seeing that, Zhang Long was a little shocked. He did not know what Lin Ji had heard on the phone, nor was he aware of Zhao Feng's patron, but he knew that Zhao Feng had a powerful patron since Lin Ji had apologized to him. After thinking for a while, Zhang Long walked over. He coughed lightly and said, "Child Lin, what did General Lin say? If necessary, I'll contact my uncle." Zhang Long's words brought Lin Ji back to reality. He glanced at Zhang Long and slowly said, "Will it make a difference?" Of course, since Zhang Yuan was seriously injured, his father won't stand by idly, even if I don't ask him, Zhang Long said while waving his hand. It doesn't make sense for him to just stand by and do nothing. Zhang Long, who was acting like he understood everything, upset Lin Ji, so Lin Ji waved his hand and replied, "I don't care what you decide to do since it has nothing to do with me." After he finished speaking, Lin Ji immediately stepped forward and left. In truth, he did not want to admit his failure. All this was because of the phone call he had received from General Lin, in which he had only said a few simple words. "I can't restrain them. How did you get into this trouble? Come to me now." The meaning behind this sentence made Lin Ji feel cold both physically and mentally. General Lin cannot restrain them. The trouble he made? Come and talk to him face to face. What he said showed that the opponent's background was extremely horrifying. How could he be in the mood to argue with Zhang Long here? Lin Ji went straight to his Hummer, then got in and drove away. While staring at the car that was driving away, Zhang Long became completely absent-minded. "Who the hell are they?" Zhang Long frowned and mumbled. "They came here and destroyed your site, then left unharmed after causing all this trouble. Their boss is Zhang Han, so where did he find these people? Are they really his men? How could he still have room left for this kind of move after leaving Shangjing?" It was inconceivable to see how that inward strength martial artist treated Xian. Upon lengthy reflections, he was unable to get any answers and was interrupted by his phone ringing. After pulling out his mobile phone and taking a look, Zhang Long had a wry smile on his face. It was Zhang Yuan's father. He would inevitably be blamed since Zhang Yuan was seriously injured inside his club. However, considering the opponent's tremendous strength, being blamed by Zhang Yuan's father was not something worth worrying about. But the news of their defeat would spread through the upper class over the next few days. After that, he and Lin Ji would both be ridiculed. Zhang Long felt somewhat wronged while thinking about it. They could have won, but they had not been prepared for this unexpected incident. The Zhang family and the wealthy families of Shangjing which backed Lin Ji definitely fostered many powerful figures. Even peak strength martial artists would be defeated, let alone people who were only at the inward strength stage. However, as the younger generation, they were not able to enter the core circle of the family yet. The opponents easily left after coming in and attacking them. During that period of time, they even matched their strength and backgrounds against these scions and surpassed them in both respects. All this was as Zhao Feng had expected. He clearly understood that Instructor Liu had an impressive background. When Instructor Liu was 4 or 5 years old, his parents died unexpectedly, so he was raised by his uncle. That was to say, his uncle was like his father, so he had a deep affection towards him. And his uncle, Liu Zhenfeng, was the commander of the Hong Kong military region. That was also why Instructor Liu had been able to save Zhao Feng from prison previously. Because of his relationship with Instructor Liu and the fact that his master lived in Hong Kong, Zhao Feng introduced Instructor Liu to Zhang Han after taking all the factors into consideration. Having more friends meant having more options. Going back to the point of all this, after Zhao Feng and the others got into the cars, they drove to the airport. "Wow, Zhao Feng, why are you so formidable? You're really awesome. Why didn't I realize this before?" While sitting behind the passenger seat, Zif leaned to the left with both of her hands on her legs and looked at Zhao Feng and while speaking with a voice that was filled with excitement. Not only her, even Xian was busy sizing up Zhao Feng with curiosity. "Everything is due to the boss teaching me," Zhao Feng replied with a chuckle. "Really? Is my brother-in-law so awesome?" Zif said with widened eyes. "Of course. You can't imagine how formidable the boss is," Zhao Feng said firmly. Xian blinked her big beautiful eyes and suddenly asked, "What's the relationship between you and Zhang Han?" Xian was really curious about the relationship between the two since Zhang Han had not been living in Hong Kong for very long. After hearing Xian's question, Zhao Feng chose to tell her the truth. After thinking for a moment, he looked at Xian and smiled, then said, "I'm the boss's disciple." Disciple? Xian froze, then she suddenly remembered that Zhao Feng had once said, "Master." He had intended to call her master's wife at that time? Xian's lips twitched, but she didn't say anything. However, Zif was curious, so she asked, "What kind of disciple? Are you learning to cook from him?" No. Zhao Feng chuckled and shook his head lightly. A hint of seriousness flashed across his eyes as he said, "He who is my teacher for day is my father for a lifetime. For me, master is the same as Tang Monk was to Sun Wukong in the journey to the west, and master is much more powerful than me." "What, do you mean my brother-in-law is more formidable than you?" Zif's eyes lit up. "He's much more formidable than me." Zhao Feng smiled. "Wow!" Zif cheered all of a sudden and excitedly said, "That's amazing. Brother-in-law is so awesome. Now I know another of my brother-in-law's strengths. It's so great." Fei. Xian gave Zif an angry stare. She hardly opened her mouth without talking about her brother-in-law, but Zhang Han, the jerk, still had an obscure attitude toward their relationship. "Hey, elder sister Yan, you should be happy." On seeing Xian's gaze, Zif realized elder sister Yan might be a little shy, but she did not care. At this moment, she looked at Zhao Feng and asked, "Zhao Feng, please tell me a little about Wolf Head. What is it?" At this point, Xian also looked at Zhao Feng with curiosity. Under their gazes, Zhao Feng smiled and said, "Wolf Head is the first squad of Zhang Han Special Forces, which usually carries out various dangerous missions. Sometimes we'll stay abroad for years." His words even shocked the full-time driver, who regained his calm the next moment as if he had not heard Zhao Feng's remark. Xian and Zuf's faces changed, and Xian said in doubt, "How do you come to know Zhang Han?" "It's a long story. Master is the one I look up to in my life, and I would have died without him, to be precise. When I was performing my undercover task as one of Tang Zan's men in the Forever Harmony Association of the Southern District, I met my master while charging protection fees in New Moon Bay. After finishing a meal, things went out of control, and..." Zhao Feng briefly described what had happened to him, but he skipped over any strange things involving cultivators and the martial arts world. Even so, Zif still marveled at his experience. But before he finished speaking, Xian suddenly exclaimed, "Ah! What's wrong, master's wife?" Zhao Feng got a fright and asked hastily, "My gift, the gift I intended to take back is still in the hotel." Xian suddenly thought about the clay sculpture. "Where's their hotel?" Zhao Feng glanced at his watch and said, "We can go there and pick it up, there's still time." "And for room number 300, replied Zif. Zhao Feng nodded and told the driver beside him, "Go the first." "Okay." The driver nodded and took out a small walkie-talkie, then said, "All the cars drive to room number 300 on and 4 road first, turn at the next intersection and plan the route." "Roger, Roger." With that, they returned to the hotel. After Xian got the gift, they headed for the airport and arrived half an hour before the plane took off. "Boss's wife, my name is Ahu and I'm one of the strongest among Brother Feng's men. You're so beautiful and charming." "Ahem, boss's wife, my name is Elder Meng and I'm also one of Brother Feng's strongest men." Boss's wife. A group of people surrounded Xian and started to introduce themselves, which helped the atmosphere become better. But Zhao Feng considered the matter when he saw their behaviors. Ahu and the others need to learn etiquette. However, should they become the kind of bodyguards who are normally grave and comply with strict standards, or the ones who are serious when working but are active at other times? On this point, Zhao Feng could not make a decision, so he planned to either ask his master for advice after going back to Hong Kong or just wait and see what happened. Half an hour passed by. As they were about to board the plane, Zhao Feng called Zhang Han to inform him that they were going to get onto the plane and would arrive at Hong Kong International Airport at about 2:30 p.m. "I see." Zhang Han nodded, then hung up the phone. After a short pause, he turned to look at the little princess who was sitting on the sofa watching TV and said with a chuckle, "Meng Meng, your mama will be back soon, let's go to Mount New Moon first and then pick your mom up." Huh? After hearing what he said, Meng Meng froze, then she stopped watching cartoons, stood up on the sofa, and cheered, "Good, good, time to pick up mama. Then let's go." Zhang Han smiled, then walked over and picked Meng Meng up. After changing Meng Meng's clothes on the second floor, he locked the door and drove his panda car to Mount New Moon. Before going there, Zhang Han went to a flower shop and bought some small tools. He intended to tie up a bunch of colorful roses together as a welcome home gift for Meng Meng's mother.